one and all, and welcome to another edition of the Breakfast Club Jamboree, or what do we got this week? It's the Jambordoodle this week with my friends Raven, Michael, and Jack. Greetings, gang. How are thee?
Jambordoodly, neighbor.
Right on. Well, earlier in the week, Raven sent me something I found quite interesting on Facebook. It was a comment from somebody about how a lot of people talk about, there might be some serious civil unrest, shall we say, or possibly even an apocalypse or Armageddon or whatever. People, there's always been survivalists my whole adult life. But a lot of times people they seem to talk about, what they're going to need. And they talk about needing to have a lot of guns in order to survive. And, as I said before we went live, you cannot eat bullets, right? You need more than weapons. One of the main things you're going to need is cooperation skills with people that you've never met before, because you're not going to have all the skills and supplies and abilities that you need to survive if, say, for example, electricity is no more, for whatever reason. Anybody?
Yeah, it's funny. A few years ago, me and my ex-wife had a joke about having the zombie apocalypse club, where we would kind of us and various friends would kind of decide that, were there some type of large disaster, we're the crew that would kind of get together, and we tried to have this set of skills. Certainly I have a bunch of books on my shelf about gardening. I've never really gardened myself. It's never been a big interest to me, but I feel like, with some maybe outside incentive, I could become a gardener or a farmer of some kind. But mostly, I'm a tool maker, I'm a welder, and I can do some blacksmithing and things like that. So that's kind of where my skill set is. But we very much made a sort of a joking, not joking premise that we would sort of figure out which friends were worth having close to us when things went real bad.
So, I saw the meme and I thought it would be a neat thing to talk about, but it also reminded me of the first deli that I had. There was the guy that lived right next door to the deli. His entire property was fenced in, and he talked frequently about his arsenal, all the different guns that he had, and that he had chickens in a coop. He had chickens and had his own eggs, and he stocked up on canned goods. And he would say that when everything goes to shit, everybody's going to go to him. And I'm sure some people will, but what he's got saved, what he's preparing for, isn't going to be enough. He isn't going to be able to take care of himself all by himself, and he has his whole family. He's not going to be able to do it because he's focusing on canned goods and guns, and that's just not going to cut it.
Right.
So
he'll make it maybe a year.
I personally know that on the way to Paul's house, there's two distinct plants that look very similar. One of them is a wild carrot. The other one is hemlock.
Yeah.
Very important to know the difference between wild carrot and hemlock. They're right in his yard. He could pick one and eat and pick one and die.
Wow.
I have a terrible hemlock story. Went on a class trip where the teacher told us about a previous class trip and a previous teacher who some kid had suggested, once they found this, naturally growing straw-like plant, that everybody could drink their chocolate milk on the trip through these straws, which of course were hemlock. And I don't believe anybody died, but the entire class had to go to the hospital and ended that class trip early. And that was sort of a warning that the teacher would, tell us all about the importance of knowing which plants are poisonous in the wild.
Yeah.
Hemlock also looks like anise for anybody who's not seen it. Anise at least will be green and juicy, and hemlock is almost always kind of dry and brittle and a little bit bamboo-like.
Well, I'm not sure if I've ever seen hemlock, but yeah, knowing how to recognize poisonous plants obviously pretty darn important. But just basic, like what they used to call local skills. Knowing how to sew, knowing how to start a fire.
I mean, I know people who know how to do all kinds of stuff, and I think most of us do. Like, none of us are like you had said in the beginning. None of us knows all of this stuff, and there's no one that's going to be able to survive if you're serious about surviving. Survive on your own. So, I mean, if you're really serious about being like a survivalist, and you want to be ready for the apocalypse, the best thing you can do is network.
Right.
It's just like anything else. I mean, it comes down to networking. Who do you know? Who do you know, and what can they do? And when shit hits the fan, are you going to be able to get together?
Yeah, famously, no one can make a pencil is sort of a analogy for that. If you were to make a pencil from scratch, it's quite a bit more difficult in the modern world, and pencils that you buy for a penny a piece are actually very complicated to produce.
Yep. Well, lots of things that we take for granted would be, difficult to obtain. But I think the main point, certainly for me, and Raven just touched on as well, I mean, you need to cooperate, you need to network with people. And with the social climate being what it is right now, we're so not ready for things to go that far awry that this type of thing would become relevant enough for our survival. And I don't know, man, doesn't look good. That's all I got to say.
I have maybe 3 or 4 of these calendars of when to plant what from the Department of Agriculture. They pass out these flyers at farmers markets so that you can see when things will be available in the farmers markets, like when they should be in season, when you should see them start to show up, right? And for each geographical agricultural zone, there are certain plants that can and cannot grow there. And with a shifting climate, that's going to change in my favor because I want to grow avocados. And I want to do it here in Colorado. And I need it to be just a couple degrees warmer for like the 4 coldest avocados to be able to grow outside of like Grand Junction.
That's not selfish, man. You want 4 degrees for your avocados, Mike? Really?
Look, I need avocados for my toast. So, as the climate changes, I'm going to find that good sweet spot to be able to plant my avocado tree. It will get plenty of water, up in the mountain. Also, with all that survivalist stuff, I want, the high ground because when the zombies come, I want to be able to pick them off. But I still need my avocado tree.
Yeah. So, like Raven, you said a minute ago that lots of people who have various different skills. But what about the resources to utilize those skills? Like, I mean, I'm not sure. For example, up here where I live, there's not a lot of agriculture. It's down there somewhere, but there's nothing up here. And so even just obtaining things would be difficult for me because, of course, to get off the mountain, you need gasoline. And gasoline, like in Mad Max, would be pretty, one of the most sought after commodities, really, because they're not going to be making any new gasoline, are they? So
I'm really curious about this idea. I've only seen it a couple times, but I believe it was Volvo built a large mining truck, one of those huge 20-ton dump trucks. And it's an electric vehicle. And it, gets loaded up with ore, and then it goes downhill in the mine to dump it. And the entire way downhill, it charges its battery on regenerative braking, so it has just enough power to drive itself back up the hill. So theoretically, if you start looking into electronics and building motors now and get the parts, you could build yourself a vehicle that can go downhill on generative braking and get
Yeah.
you back uphill, back to your fortifications, your mott at the end of the day.
I like it.
One thing to remember, though, in your group, whoever you have with you in your little survival group, you're not feeding an army. You're not feeding like massive amounts of people. So as far as agriculture goes, you could get seeds and put those into storage for when you need them. And that's a resource that'll just keep replenishing every time you grow crops.
Sure.
You'll just get more seeds. I mean, that's kind of how plants work.
Yeah, but you still
so,
need.
you don't need big, huge fields because you're feeding a small group. So
You still need pretty large amounts of space just per person. I believe each person needs about an acre to feed them.
Right.
And
I mean, that's doable almost everywhere. I mean, urban centers would be tough. And if you're like, I mean, I'm in the mountains. The mountains are a little bit different than the mountains by you, but I don't think you're on rock. Right? There's dirt outside. You go outside, there is some dirt, right?
Yeah.
So you'll be okay. I mean, so yeah.
So, as far as like keeping with the vehicles that we have, I do know how to take what comes out of a fracking well, which, if all the population left, all the fracking wells that are just in Weld County right now, if it was zombie apocalypse time and there was, a fraction of the people, you could still get crude oil from those fracking tanks. And as soon as you took some out, the fracking well would kick back on again because that's how they operate. Once the tank gets full, the well stops. So you can take some of that and make crude diesel fuel for a diesel truck without having to do a lot of refining. You'd have to do some hydrocracking to get the kind of gasoline that we run in our cars. But you could get some good diesel fuel, or you could turn a diesel truck into a vegetable oil running monster.
Seems like a lot of work to preserve gasoline is the main thing.
Yeah,
when
we come back, maybe we want to like eschew the things that got us there.
Yeah, I would hope so.
A moment ago, Raven was talking about how you have an acquaintance. Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just. It took me a while to find my mouse so I can unmute myself. Sorry, Michael. Yeah, we should do that, but we wouldn't. The first things that we would do as a society, if we were back up on our feet, we'd start the oil wells going again immediately. That'd be one of the first things.
So oil is used for a lot more things than just as a fuel. We need oil for plastics, And if we're ever going to make another cell phone ever, we're going to need some of those plastics.
Right.
I always thought it was a huge shame that we wasted really millions and millions of years of stored ancient sunlight within a handful of decades, 12, 13 decades that we've been using oil. And we've used up some 65 million years worth of stored sunlight in an incredibly brief amount of time. And we've thrown away so many plastics. And just imagine had we kind of husbanded our resources, recognized at an earlier time how wonderful plastic is as a material, how wonderful gasoline is as a fuel. And we had really been careful and doled it out in a way that made sense so that we had, 5, 6, 7,000 years of careful use of plastic.
There's no money in that. Come on.
Of course not. Because
okay, so one of my things about that is one of the reasons that we have so much oil in the earth in the first place, of course, is because plus or minus 65 million years ago, comet or asteroid hit the earth and everything simultaneously died. So you've got all this vegetation and animal life that's decomposing simultaneously and turning into goo, and then it all gets buried by ash and millions of years of pressure and so on, and boom, there you've got oil. If that asteroid never hit, assuming that human life eventually evolved anyway, right, which is a completely, like, if the asteroid never hit, that's entirely possible it wouldn't have happened. But I mean, there wouldn't be any oil. Think about, we've discussed in previous Breakfast Club streams about how different the world would be without electricity. I mean, if there would never, ever was petroleum oil found, what would our Earth be like? Would we still be living a mostly agrarian lifestyle?
I certainly doubt we'd have so many of us. I mean, it is definitely the case that at least our ability to feed this many people is dependent on oil, as we use petroleum fertilizers and things like that. It's very likely that we might not have crossed, 3 or 4 billion. It's really hard to predict, though, because it's not like things don't die over that period. Maybe you don't have the concentration of death that you had after the asteroid, but you still do have 65 million years of compressed fossil fuels or of, carbon being compressed under the ground. So we might have still discovered oil, maybe not in large, pockets that were so readily usable. Maybe we would have used it more cautiously. And, maybe your average oil well would have a few barrels worth in it rather than, hundreds of millions of barrels.
I think that we could still have come to using corn for ethanol and using corn for corn oil for like a diesel fuel style thing, but the plastics we wouldn't have. A lot of the just energy that is stored in just one drop of oil to be able to run power tools we would not have. We would not have skyscrapers without oil.
Right, that's a good example.
We would have, at one point, discovered a way to make plastics out of hemp. I mean, they make plastic out of hemp today.
Possibly, but I mean, even our electricity, because coal is just sort of another form of the same kind of stored carbon.
Sure.
So if we didn't have huge deposits of coal and things like that, we might never have gotten to a steam engine because there just wasn't large enough quantities of the stuff. There's a lot of things that it's possible we never got to the point where we could reliably create the amount of heat we needed to make steel tools. And that goes all the way back to the Roman Empire. That we could have seen sort of a beginning of an alternate history where we simply never had the resources to make, very high temperature fire or steam or other things, pretty early, and that might have massively changed where we ended up today.
I'm sorry. I wanted to get Vegas up to speed. So yeah, it's not a right wing prepper stream; it's left wing. And as Michael said, guns are de-emphasized in this. Because that's the people on the right, the right wing preppers. They're always gathering their guns to get ready for the end times. And what we're talking about is how that's kind of useless. So
also, I'm okay with brown people after the apocalypse. We could have some of those. I'm okay.
Yeah, the question is, after the apocalypse, most third world countries are going to be in a lot better place to survive it than we are. Certainly, they will have a lot of famine and destruction from rising tides and things like that. But for people who already live on less than $1 a day, or already have kind of lived a hard scrabble existence, many more of them will find it easier to survive than the cushy.
Well, a lot of them now are currently working for the benefit of other people. Mostly us. Whether it's food or some kind of manufacturing, anything, just about anything in third world countries. So people work their asses off for the benefit of us. once they're working for the benefit of themselves, their standard of living will go up in that kind of a situation.
I think another thing that might be useful for people to know, just like if we were building a civilization from scratch, I know that I could pick out copper in the mountain and say, that's copper. That's where you should get more copper. Keep digging there. Some people wouldn't know what color copper is in nature.
Right.
I do know how to smelt crudely to get iron, and I could do that, but I would have to be a king directing 100 people.
Yeah, right.
At that point, you'd have to have your civilization to be able to, it would be a fool's errand if I just wanted one sword. It would take me my whole life.
Here's a question that you just reminded me of when you said king. So do you think, because you would have to have like cooperatives, would we devolve into a feudalist society where you've got basically, lord of the manor, as it were, in their protected grounds with their, their craftspeople and serfs working the grounds for the benefit of all?
Well, that assumes that the European style of living was the natural order. And we know from tribes all over the world that that's not necessarily the case. And not even all European tribes. I mean, obviously you have the Goths and the Gaelic tribes and Nordic tribes who all had not exactly a feudal system. They had chieftains, but they, like the small tribal scenario where you have a leader, and sometimes tribes of various types have kind of appointed a leader more or less against that person's will. Like, it's your job to be the leader. You have a skill that we recognize and nobody else wants that job. So it really doesn't necessarily mean we devolve into feudalism. That seems to be very closely related to our American concept, though.
Whatever group that I am in, I know I would emerge as queen. I mean, I think that goes without saying.
I'm going to say just right off the bat, if we hit that apocalypse point, some of us have a little bit more stored energy than others. I'm going to give Raven, like, maybe, since I've watched Survivor, I know how this works. There's like 30 days worth of energy in those boobs before they go flat, right? I think I've got maybe 2 months in me before I get down to a reasonable size where I'd have to go forage for food.
It's 3 months for me.
You're screwed.
Oh, I'm somebody else's dinner. That's what's going to happen to me. The people will be arguing about whether they should bother to kill me or not because there's really not a good meat on me. So, I'd be cannibal food. Yep. Not voluntarily. I just would be.
So you're saying you aren't like Armie Hammer?
I don't even know who that is.
Actor who famously has a cannibal kink.
Oh, right. No, yeah. So, yeah.
Came out in the public.
Right over my head. Yeah. No, you have to remember, I was culturally disassociated from America for 30 years. So there's all sorts of people that I'm supposed to know who they are that I don't know who they are.
The funny thing about Armie Hammer is I believe he's directly descended from the Arm & Hammer baking soda fortune.
Right.
So he was also a rich kid who became an actor.
Wow.
He played Lone Ranger in the most recent terrible Disney Lone Ranger movie. But I will recommend an Armie Hammer role if anybody has seen Sorry to Bother You, which is directed by Boots Riley of The Coup. That is a fantastic film, and Armie Hammer is the greatest villain ever. He's wonderful in it.
Well, that's a good recommendation. So have we squeezed all the juice out of this lemon? I mean, is there anything else we want to talk about in terms of?
I think there's more to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We were talking a little bit about guns earlier. As you know, Paul, I made a video on whether or not guns are actually an effective way of preventing tyranny a while back, because I don't buy the argument that most people who are pro Second Amendment use, which is that they have their gun to prevent tyranny. And as far as I can tell, whether you're on the left or the right or anywhere in between, most people feel like the United States is tyrannical in some stripe or another.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, like, when the guns were supposed to prevent that tyranny.
I'll make a not quite a counterpoint, but a sort of parallel point to what you're making. I mean, guns don't get rid of tyranny. Saddam Hussein's Iraq, 19 out of every 20 households had automatic weapons in Baghdad. And in the country at large, I'm not sure how much wider, but that's why every house got raided. It's because they knew they were going to find guns, right? And
well, I mean, how about this though? I mean, you're not going to become a tyrant if you aren't armed to the teeth and have other people who are armed willing to support you.
well, yeah, I hear that. But my point is, Saddam Hussein was a brutal dictator, and his people being armed didn't make them revolt, for one thing. And he certainly wasn't afraid of his people, despite the fact they all had guns. So I don't think it prevents tyranny at all.
Yeah, and I kind of think of it almost more, and I know this isn't directly related to the topic at hand, but I think it, in some ways, it's more like a blankie, that it prevents people from revolting. If people have their guns, they feel like they have power and they can always come and do something, but they're not going to. I love that CPG Vegas brought that up because, of course, you know, who gave the Taliban all those guns in the first place?
And then I wanted to say, I mean, you know, I saw a video of the Taliban, their fighters, some of the leadership. It's all over the news, and all of those people had regular size arms. So
No bear arms.
Vegas is of course emphasizing strengths that right-leaning post-apocalyptic preppers might have, like having a lot of guns, and they might even have better auto mechanic skills than, say, a team of left-leaning preppers. But I tell you what, my friends know how to make candles, so we're going to be able to read at night. My friends know how to make soap. Find me right-wing people that know how to make candles and soap. I'm just saying, we've got a few of the skills that you need. Really. Find me a right-wing beekeeper.
Oh,
Paul,
I'm sure they exist. But
Paul, if you're going to talk to me, you need to unmute. Come correct.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you for correcting me. I'm humbled. One thing that occurs to me about the apocalypse, right, is, I mean, let's just say it happened tomorrow that everybody was fighting everybody and you had to pick a side, right? Mm-hmm. Assuming that I felt safe picking a side, I don't know what skills I have to offer my cooperative. I guess just blood, sweat, and tears for whatever laboring I could do. But you have to be able to contribute if you're going to be taking from the cooperative, right? You have to be a participant. You can't just, you know. And I'm curious. I wonder. I think to myself, oh my God, am I just gonna like die once all my canned food is gone? Because I'm gonna be one of those people who just like croaks because I don't have the networking and I don't have the skills to offer anybody other than, hey, I'll dig that hole for you, or I'll chop down that tree for you, or whatever the fuck, you know, because that's pretty much all I can do is manual labor.
Well, there's also prostitution.
So many bad jokes are flooding my mind at the same time. I can't even go there. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like in small, I don't want to say societies, but in small groups, where survival is a thing, there is, and it makes sense, the thinking of if you don't work, you don't eat, right? That comes about. And it makes sense. They need to be that way. And we talked about this a little bit last time, where it's like once you get past a certain point when your survival of the entire group isn't, you know, on the shoulders of the entire group, You can do things like, entertainment becomes a thing, the arts become a thing. There's an old saying about, I don't remember all of it, but it's basically like, I bust my ass so my kid can study art. And that's what it comes down to. And in small groups like that, where survival is the thing, that's what it is. You have to. So, I mean, you don't know what skills you have, right? But you can dig holes. That's work, and that kind of stuff would need to be done.
Sure.
I mean, if you have nothing at all and you can't even dig a hole, yeah, then you might have a problem.
Yeah, right.
Assuming that we have no communication, no newspapers, and no social media, the preppers on the
That
left
sounds like heaven.
have this extreme advantage in that we understand medicine. Now, like on the basic first aid level, the right wing preppers are probably going to have a first aid kit in their bug out bag, but none of the left wing preppers are going to drink bleach.
Well, it's true. I mean, Vegas is saying about, his money is on the right wingers, and that's probably because, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it's probably because the typical thinking on the right is that guns is security. You have guns, you're going to be okay because you can defend yourself and you can shoot food. But that's just not enough, and that's not going to cut it. And you need more than that, and you need to be able to network.
I mean, I know that I'm.
You need the skills of the left.
I'm existing in a little bit of a bubble in that I happen to be a highly skilled person, and consequently, because I'm working on very diverse and challenging projects constantly, then I tend to have a friend group of highly skilled people, welders and mechanics and builders and things like that. But I mean, my perception is that if you're not entirely dealing with more metaphysical or philosophical skills, most people I think most people in general will be able to put together a group of people, among their friend group, depending on how large it is, that can make a survival group. I don't really think that it's a left wing, right wing thing. I think that there's definitely differences in focus. And I think that the people who expressly focus on guns as being their major sort of backup plan are probably in worse stead than they believe.
Right.
Absolutely. I will say, though, in fairness to the gun people, every one of those groups needs at least one.
Right.
I don't mean one gun person.
One gun nut. Yeah.
Every group needs one gun nut.
Well,
because that is security. I mean, there's no way around it. Your group will need security because there are other groups that might not be as well put together as yours. There's wild animals,
or who might be more aggressive in their group.
Every group needs at least one gun nut.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I also think that there's an implication among the gun focused people that and that maybe they don't necessarily admit out loud, but that they're going to be pirates. I mean, the groups with all the guns are going to depend on piracy to survive.
That's a scary thought and probably spot on as well.
I doubt many groups would necessarily deny it. They won't put it on the home page of their prepper group. But
I mean, I can almost guarantee that none of them are really like thinking that that's what they want to do. You know what I mean? It's like they're hoarding their canned goods and their guns, and they're just like, I'm going to take care of me. I'm going to take care of mine, and I will get through this. And then after a year, when their canned goods are either expired or gone, and all they have is their guns, yeah, that's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to be forced to do. They'll be roving bands of pirates.
Well, and with the libertarian mindset, they always think that they're going to be the ones who are on top. And that is, I mean, obviously not everyone can be on top. Not everyone is going to get to be the warlord. the warlord mostly has underlings and war boys or whatever it is. And I think most people who have that libertarian mindset are going to be deeply disappointed when the apocalypse comes and they are actually somebody's footstool most of the time.
I think a problem with wanting to be on top or being on top is that there's always people who want to take your place. And so that's actually more responsibility than I would just want to survive and literally get along and try not to get enough attention to where people want to come and raid my village or whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, you know.
So one of the things that I look at is the numbers. Like if we're post-apocalyptic, did half of us die? Did 90% of us die? Because if we didn't, and all of these people in America have guns, all the animals are going to run out real quick. If that's their only source of food is animals, right?
I'm sure there will be
put everything into like extinction. That's at least things that are land walking critters, right? They're going to kill all the rats, which will be nice, but yeah, we're just going to run out of things to kill if 100% of people are still alive. But the same goes for my gathering skills, because people will figure out what a carrot looks like real quick. If it's a free-for-all, people will just hoard and try to kill each other by hoarding.
Yeah, I imagine some of those warlords will be pig farmers, cattle ranchers, things like that. Or those will be taken over by warlords, and many of the factory farms and things like that will simply continue under new management. But that doesn't change the fact that feed stocks could dwindle quite quickly, and you might have a plenty of we will run out of bullets before we run out of rats. That is true.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of rats, you're also going to have that trouble with the feed stocks and things like that. I mean, there's an awful lot of chemical kind of extermination that goes on in the farming that we currently do. So, as much as we on the left hate Monsanto, as soon as Monsanto or other big chemical companies, are gone, then large parts of our current food production are gone as well. That doesn't mean I think that our current food production is done the best way. I believe we could do it without the Monsantos of the world. But if the apocalypse happens tomorrow, then much of our agribusiness goes when Monsanto goes.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever driven across Kansas or Iowa, you know that those farms are way, way, way too big for one family to operate, right? I mean, just irrigating those things. Where would that? If electricity doesn't exist, you're not going to be able to irrigate those massive acres and acres, tens of thousands of acres for that matter, of these fields of corn and wheat and whatever else. And wheat is something we take for granted, right? In terms of all the things we use it for. But if we couldn't grow wheat, that's one of our main staples wiped out.
Yeah, quite quickly.
Vegas, there's a meme that's floating around Facebook, basically saying that in a survivalist situation, an apocalypse type situation, that networking and being able to do things like grow food and leather work and that kind of stuff is going to be more valuable than guns. So I just thought it would be a decent thing to talk about. So we are.
Yeah. I haven't done it, but I know how to shear a sheep and I know how to spin the wool into yarn and stuff like that. That's a skill I realize I've got that I could do, but I don't have
quite a good one.
Yeah. Making yarn is easy. Doing anything with the yarn, that's the hard part. I'm not so good at that,
Now I've made candles, but I never made the paraffin. So, right. I mean, but then again, there's beeswax. So,
I think a good skill to have would be the patience to be able to read a book. And I think people could probably get it back fairly quickly, within a month or two. But there's this withdrawal that people are going to have from their cell phones. It's going to be massive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And as much as you say that tongue in cheek, it's really, really true. I mean, it's like, a lot of people feel naked without their phone. You know what I mean?
I read a book last night, and I'll do it again. But there are a lot of people who have eschewed books and have gone to
Is that a threat?
Information from their cell phone. And a lot of people get their information in video form now. We're feeding that right now. But
yeah, sure we are. Yeah. So, Michael, if you don't mind me asking, what book did you read last night?
How to Open a Private Practice in 7 Days by Anthony Santore. He's the CEO of ThriveWorks, and it was basically just a step-by-step, very bare bones, everything that you would need to do that. But I was looking at it as far as like, have I missed anything in what I want to do in my 5-year plan?
Right.
I was looking for all of his little insights in there, and there's some good stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, what you say about having the patience to read is actually super, super important. My daughter's got this massive, thick book, and she wants to live off grid. She has this fantasy about, for that matter, goal of getting off the grid and just as much as possible living close to a more sort of spare life than modern living at the moment, right? And she's got this book and literally everything you could ever need to know about how to make stuff and how to do the stuff. I'm going to have to buy a whole bunch of copies of this book just to give my family here in America for Christmas because it's that good. Yeah. Hi, Joe. How you doing?
So.
Huh. Okay, that explains the expression on your face.
Yeah. Well, I'm at the conference, and I don't know. I just having a good time, meeting people, and also seeing some old friends and everything. And I don't know. I just got. Sometimes when I'm in a crowd of people, I kind of get this feeling of being very detached and being very apart and feeling not like I don't belong there.
I'm acquainted with that feeling, Joe. I know just how you feel.
And like then you feel like you're a burden to be around people. And even though like I was sitting in the hall and people were like, "Oh, come on in and hang with us," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be back in a minute," and then I just took off.
Well, I'm sorry you're feeling the blahs, man.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking. This will cheer you up. We're talking about surviving the apocalypse. So, what skills would you bring to the table? Because obviously, we're going to have to exchange skills in such a scenario, right? Like we talked about on Facebook, just having guns and canned food is not going to be enough.
Well, I mean, I'm an engineer, so that I got a lot of skills related to that, and I can probably help get the electrical system back up, and I could, and I know a lot of chemistry, so I can help with a lot of that kind of stuff.
Oh, good. You can replace Monsanto.
Yeah. Yeah. I promise to be a far more ethical version of Monsanto.
There's a level of chemistry that I think maybe none of us have that I would be missing, and that's because there are daily medications I take that make my life a lot better, and I would still be able to survive without them. But there are a lot of people on some psych meds right now that I do not want to have around me if they don't have them. And I mean this with all the love I have for people with mental health disorders, but like when they're that bad, some of them, you need to call 911.
That's a terrifying thing to contemplate, Michael. I hadn't really thought about it, but you're right. If medication stopped being produced or was produced or distributed in a way which made it impossible for me to obtain, I would not survive without my medication. Something happened to me. I'd probably have a heart attack is what will happen. So, yeah.
I mean, the thing is, if I knew if I knew what the process was to synthesize that, I could do that.
I wouldn't survive. I mean, yeah, I got that one pill a day I take that keeps me alive. So yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah, because with my blood pressure medicine ran out, I'd have about a month or two, and if that, but yeah, maximum.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. When I was younger, I never thought I'd be dependent on a pill to survive. And I kind of like just intellectually and emotionally resent it. But at the same time, on a higher level, I know it's for my own good. So I do it. But there was a long time when I first had to go on permanent medication where I was kind of resistant to taking it for some psychological reason I couldn't really identify. Just I didn't want to be dependent on something, and surrendering that it was really hard for me. That I need this. I can't get by without it. I will have bad effects. So yeah, it's a hard one. It's very humbling.
There's something that I think, in part because of the way we're trained to believe that everybody, at least in sort of a capitalist economy, everybody is a self-directed, conscious actor who's working in their own best interest. They're self-interested, and that they are all out there sort of, this is a little bit of the Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand kind of perspective on the way human society works. But of course, that's not really the way human society works. We have plenty of, James Dewars and Polks or Salks and Teslas and other people who have contributed their knowledge and their skill to the world, regardless of whether there was financial compensation on the line. And we see that all the time, when Hurricane Katrina happened, thousands of people from all over the country kind of who had very little in the first place went down to New Orleans to help rebuild after the hurricane, many of them just running soup kitchens and things like that. I don't believe that humans are nearly as selfish as a lot of people believe. And I don't think that the so-called apocalypse necessarily means as large a collapse as people imagine. I think what we'll see is a collapse of institutions, and certainly we'll have disruptions of supply chains and things like that. But in terms of whether or not, patented medicines simply disappear and are no longer available to the public, I think what you have is plenty of people at these very companies that produce those, Bayer or other places, will simply start manufacturing the medicine without the company there to tell them to do it because it's needed.
Well,
and
it really depends on the nature of this apocalypse we're contemplating, though, because
sure.
The key thing is, because you got to remember too, is that those facilities are also dependent on regular shipments of certain materials
Absolutely.
that they may or may not have access to. See, the thing is, like when the Roman Empire collapsed, I mean, it wasn't just one day. It took a while, but a lot of the technology, people just forgot how to fix it. So it could go either way. I mean, I think you're right. There's certainly, that's a possibility. What you're saying, it really matters if the electrical grid stays running. Then I think what you're talking about will be very possible. The electrical grid collapses. I think then humanity's got about 3 months.
Right. And even in the circumstance of an electrical grid collapse, there are people who will sort of revert things. Obviously, we're not going to have the coal mining that, produces the electricity and things like that. We will be able to manage some things. I mean, generators are pretty common. Here in Portland, where we have, a very large homeless population, about 10 to 20% of all the homeless people in Portland have a generator and have electricity, and that is simply obviously then you have the supply chain issues of once the gasoline for the generators runs out, but there is going to be, as you say, sort of this slow collapse, and you'll probably see these transitions that are happening, especially because you can go to Harbor Freight and buy 45-watt solar panels and things like that, and
We've
see
got
a lot of that kind of thing.
We've got these things. It's like a portable solar panel that you can open up anywhere, and you hook it up to this thing called a Goal Zero. It looks like a car battery, basically. It's like a lithium battery. It's about the size of a car battery. You can charge it up with sunlight, and you can also charge it up with like a wind thing that we have, but that's not very efficient, I have to say. And so, yeah, we can take free energy. We can put the Goal Zero in the car and take it with us, or we can have it here if there's a power outage or whatever. And honestly, it's well worth having because power outages happen, especially if you live in the PG&E district of California or the Pacific Northwest. You know what I mean? And just last July, when I was in St. Louis, they had the most vicious lightning storm I've ever seen in my life, and hundreds of trees, well, thousands of trees went down all over St. Louis, and I think it knocked power out for like 85,000 homes. And anyway, we had given my gal's kids all the Goal Zeros so they didn't lose their freezer stuff, and they were able to keep things going while the power was down. The power was down for 3 days. So these types of things are really worth having.
So, yeah. So if the power grid goes down, Jack was kind of talking about generators, but also, I mean, there'll be some people who will know how to do it, and they could just localize the power grid. There'll be, locally generated power in some places. Not every place will be able to do that.
Right.
And also about the canned goods, I wanted to answer Green Machine. Canned goods can go bad. One of the things, technically, what is in the can will stay good indefinitely. But that depends on storage. And like sunlight, believe it or not, sunlight can destroy what's inside the can because what's inside the can is still subject to heat. So if the sun is beating on it long enough, no matter how hot it is outside, inside the can will heat up. So whatever's in there could go bad. Moisture could cause small little bits of rust on the can. All kinds of stuff. So once the integrity of the can is defeated by something, what's inside won't last much longer. So nothing is perfect.
You know what we won't need? Lawyers.
Well,
They have
there's
no
a
skill.
food source right there. We could all cannibalize the lawyers.
Actually, I can think of a reason to have at least some. I mean, you're going to need somebody who's going to be able to mediate disagreements.
Are lawyers really the best people to do that, though?
If you're the one that needs, if you're the one that needs someone to, speak for them, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that every single person that's a judge was a lawyer first, right? So,
right.
Yeah, I'm really not sure that that our current legal education system produces mediators primarily.
Well, it depends on what kind of law you're talking about, too. I mean, contract law, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it, at least as far as I understand it, it seems to produce argumentative people with particularly self-interested points of view.
That's a cynical view. I know it's fun to beat on lawyers, but I know a lot of lawyers, and it's a mixed bag, just like everybody else. Same thing for that matter. I mean, even though we won't have the same type of law, there's still going to be rules, and there's still going to be, you get accused of stealing some, taking some extra food, you're going to want an advocate that's going to go out there and keep you from getting your hand chopped off or something.
Unless it's my group where, like I said, I would emerge as queen. I don't care who you have. If you piss me off, you're done. So
I think we're also going to have, well, this is strange, but we're going to have people who know how to fix air conditioners. Because every time a place with a lot of air conditioning goes without the ability to air condition, people die.
I'm actually a U.S. Army trained air conditioner mechanic.
Well, there you go. There's your skill right there, Raven. You will
I mean,
survive.
the principles of an air conditioner are not particularly complicated. It's pretty easy to build a relatively low level air conditioner. It's the gas that's difficult to obtain. And so,
That's right, the man.
yeah, hopefully, yeah, there are people who are able to manufacture the gas or, get the gas out of other products.
That would make me the ice queen.
That's cool.
Let it go.
Oh, don't do that again.
That was good. I like that.
Can you have polygamy in your dystopian world? Yes. I mean, in my group where I'm queen, sure.
I don't know that it's necessarily dystopian. And I think part of what I'm getting at is I think that there is a possibility for, and I think that part of the reason lots of people do kind of lust for the apocalypse, particularly millennials, some of Gen Z, there's this idea that an apocalypse of some kind is inevitable. I think most people have some sense that whatever this society is, it's sort of winding down. Of course, we have some historical precedent for the age of how long empires last before they collapse. Historically, that doesn't mean it has anything to do with how the modern world operates. But I think on some level, the large amount of collapse media that we have, or collapse entertainment, apocalyptic entertainment, has to do with the suspicion that we could actually build a better world than we have with a blank slate, or with some sort of tabula rasa. Tabula rasa is absolutely impossible. I'm not saying that that's what would happen, but I think that that is a kernel of the desire to see this collapse.
Here's the thing, though. I feel that all the people who feel that way, there are still tracts of land in various parts of the world where there's not a lot of people. So I think that they should go there and demonstrate it, and if it works, I think they would convince people. But I don't think they actually. I mean, it's romantic to say. I don't think. I'm not sure that they actually believe it, because there's zero reason not for them to do it now.
I don't think that's true at all. I mean, there's plenty of legal reasons why that would be very difficult. I mean, you've seen plenty of examples where people have tried to create breakaway communities and have been, either harassed by governments or, run afoul of landowners who happen to own the tract of land that they have, and they weren't aware of.
Right, but you're right. I'm not saying for them to be squatters. I'm saying for them to pool their resources and acquire a tract of land and then show us the way.
No, I mean, I think that's been.
Mind you, Jack, I feel the same way about the right wing, preppers and everything too. Like the guy, all those freaks in Montana that think they're going to make some libertarian society. I'm like, oh, build it, demonstrate it, and then if you show me that it works, I'll get on board.
So what I think, Jack, I think there are a lot of people who fetishize the apocalypse. They want the breakdown of law and order. That's the romantic notion. Is that there'll be no rules on them.
Yeah,
but think about what do you think is romantic? What do you think that they think is romantic about that?
Well, it's just that they can be the dickheads that they feel like they should be entitled to be anyway, and the only thing
because they're not free enough at the moment.
Right, yeah. Right, and the only thing restraining them is law and order.
So you believe that everybody who wants a different
not everybody. No. Hashtag not all douchebags. But I mean, I think there are absolutely a group, a large enough demographic of them that feel that way.
Right, but that doesn't explain the huge profusion of collapse media. I mean, everything.
No, but it's not. But it wasn't meant to. Right. It wasn't meant to, which is fine. I'm just saying that there is a large demographic of people who really get off on the idea of society collapsing because they want the breakdown of polite society.
I just wanted to say, I mean, I've made this point before on a video, like my channel, like 10, 12 years ago, but people are always keen to say, you know, society is about to collapse. Look how shit everything is, blah, 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 blah. And whilst that's true, society's, you know, got lots of problems and they're all pretty damn self-evident and whatever. I'm old enough to remember the 1960s when we had like Medgar Evers and John F. Kennedy and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. That's all political assassinations. That's 5. And that's just the famous ones. There was riots in 1967 and 68 in literally hundreds of American cities. You know, I mean, and my parents, I remember, I'm old enough to remember them talking about how there was going to be a revolution and how the country was going to shit. And is America going to survive? That's 50 fucking years ago.
Okay. So, I mean, society has always sucked. All societies, all civilizations from the beginning of time. The first time 4 people got together and elected one of them leader, most of the people hated that person, and everything they did. That's just human nature. We've always hated our. If a perfect society existed, we would have figured out how to do it by now.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, and that's why.
I'm sorry. I have to push back. I'm sorry. I have to push back. Hold your thought, please, Joe. I have to push back. When I lived in England, I visited literally hundreds of burials where the chieftain was buried. The leaders were not hated. They were absolutely revered because once someone's dead, you don't have to make this incredible thing for them. They're dead, man. You don't have to do it, but they do these things. You know what I mean? So I don't agree. Anyway, carry on, Joe. What were you going to say?
Well, so I mean, I don't think that defeats Raven's point though, because I think because basically people, you know, society as bad as things are now, if we go back any significant distance in the past, it was significantly worse. And if you go further back than that, it was worse than that. So again, there's this fetishizing that there was some halcyon past where everything was awesome, and we could just get back to that, and it's complete horseshit. You know, people died of of diseases of their teeth, and and half of people's children died because there was no such thing as antibiotics or vaccinations. So I really despise the people who have this fucking fetish notion of going back to some, and again, as I say, go buy some fucking land and show me that it works and that it's better than what we had before. Because as bad as things are now, it's better than it's ever been. So,
right.
So I don't know. That sounds very Fukuyama and end of history kind of talking. No, I don't buy it at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. Because I'm not saying it's as best as it can be. I'm saying it's better than it's been. And if we don't kill ourselves 100 years from now, we'll look back at this and think of how trash this time was, because it'll be better 100 years from now.
And Paul, to demonstrate my point, one of the most beloved presidents in the last 60 years in this country is Ronald fucking Reagan. And I know about 50% of our society absolutely despises that motherfucker for the evil fuck that he was. So yeah, he is lionized today. He is Saint Ron, who can do no wrong, but he was an evil fuck. Yeah, so it absolutely makes sense that leaders who, after they die, would have monuments built to them and, mausoleums in graveyards and all this stuff honoring them, while a large percentage of the population hated them.
Right.
It's always been that way.
The people before us, put out a lot of sweat and blood to get us to the shitty spot where we are now. And the idea of throwing all that over and starting over again, to me, seems ridiculous.
I don't think you're going to have a choice. I mean, I don't think that maybe you will, because, it's not, as Paul said, it's been 50 years and people have been saying that.
And they said it 50 years before that too.
Yeah, I don't think that when the end comes, and it is inevitable, I mean, any idea that this particular structure continues indefinitely is preposterous. But we're going to see massive changes just in the next 10 or 15 years with climate change. We're going to see massive amounts of refugees. We're going to see water wars. We're probably going to see large military conflicts over resources that we never expected. We're going to see huge famines, large
I mean,
die-offs.
we're seeing stuff now. Beginning to take shape. Donald Trump has like his entire thing with the election has kicked off this whole thing, that this domino chain, where when people are like lose faith in the elections, when 50% of the population doesn't feel that they can trust the elections anymore, in a country that has more guns than pretty much anywhere else on the face of the earth, we're gonna have a real problem. We're looking at political uprisings in this country over the next several years.
Sure. The thing is I don't see the change. I agree. Will there be big changes, Jack? I believe you are correct. We may disagree about the nature of those changes, but we certainly agree that there's going to be big changes. But I don't see those changes as equivalent to an apocalypse. I mean, humanity has always changed. We used to be feudal, and before we were that, we were something else. And
sure, what we're talking about is the collapse of this particular empire,
right? But
that is inevitable. But beyond the collapse,
but that's different from the collapse of society. That's not the same thing.
The collapse of this particular civilization will be a lot like a societal collapse.
Yeah,
it'll just ripple outwards around the world. We affect the entire planet. And when the U.S. crashes, and it will, it's going to be a mess for everyone. So,
yeah, and what feels like an apocalypse on a local level might not be an extinction event for humankind. We're not, like, we use the word apocalypse sort of colloquially, when we're talking about societal collapse. We're talking about some pretty fundamental changes that are necessitated by a set of things that we've already put into motion. It's even if we stopped using fossil fuel right this second across the entire globe, it'll be another 9 to 10 years before we even start to see that have any kind of result in the climate. Yeah. So, and we're not going to stop.
Well, the thing is, I guess where I differ is I don't see that. I don't call that an apocalypse. So to me, apocalypse is Fallout. Like the Fallout series, apocalypse is a super bug that makes COVID look tame. No,
and I don't know if that's what we were talking about from the beginning. I mean, I think the way the conversation was set up was talking about a major societal, governmental kind of collapse as colloquially the apocalypse. Yeah. And of course, I started the conversation joking about, the zombie apocalypse team that, me and my ex-wife put together. But that, that's all sort of a stand-in for something else.
Yeah. See, I think Duxilla is correct. I think what would happen is we would end up splitting up into smaller countries.
I think that the breakdown of the U.S. Could very well be like that, a split into different countries. I got a feeling though that it won't be. I got a feeling that it'll be a lot more violent than that. I think with the rise of right wing violence and Christian willful ignorance will cause
nationalism.
And nationalism will cause a lot of skirmishes.
There'll be a lot of Kekistans everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's going. I think it'll be more of a civil war, with multiple sides. Where it'll be multiple factions, not north and south. It'll be a mess. It'll be everywhere, and I think that other foreign powers will definitely get their hands in there, and I think what we think of the United States will be pulled to pieces, and yeah, the country will be raped.
Well, I mean,
from within and from without. I mean, it'll be a mess. It'll be bad.
But to me, it's kind of like mutually assured destruction. It's like the reason we never had a nuclear conflict between nuclear armed powers is because of mutually assured destruction, right? And it's the same thing. Whether there's a societal collapse or not, the same thing pertains to be true. We all don't have a choice. We either live together or we die together. That's the choice.
There is a demographic. There is a demographic within this country that does not care about living or dying. They care about being right. And if they have to die in order to make you wrong, to prove you wrong, they will.
That's right. They're in the process of freedoming themselves in the cemetery right now.
Living isn't the goal for them.
See,
Being
actually,
right is the goal.
see. Here's the funny thing. So I reached that point because again, my compassion well is pretty well empty. So at this point, I'm not even promoting vaccinations to them anymore. If they want to, hit the accelerator into the cemetery, good riddance. Because the more of them do that, the less likely these nightmare scenarios we were talking about are actually to happen.
So in the coming years, all of the trials and the challenges that the U.S. is going to face, and there will be many, and there will be violence, and there will be blood. If as a country we survive this, I guarantee you they will blame all of it in the history books on COVID. That's what's going to end up happening in the future. They will blame it on COVID, that the virus had so deeply divided the country. They won't talk about Trump. It won't be about him. It'll be about COVID.
They'll talk
Guaranteed.
about Trump.
Not in
Not
in that context. They're not going to blame him. They won't. The history won't blame him.
Well,
It's
remember too, he is also a symptom of something that's been growing for 50 years. Because you couldn't have him without the last 50 years of this right-wing movement. Actually, I was talking to somebody here at the conference where her website is strategic extremist. So she's pretty far left, but she's got a strategic mind, and so she understands what it takes to actually build the kind of world that she wants. And so what she's doing is she's got a consultancy where she's dealing with mostly state and local candidates to try to help them because they don't have a lot of ad money. So it's a way to try to get them. And her thing is like, yeah, a lot of these candidates, they're not going to win, but that's not the point. The point is to keep pushing the penny and change the mindset of the electorate and push them in the right direction. I like to think about Raven's run. Raven, you
Right.
knew you weren't going to win, but you got more votes than any Democrat has gotten in ages. So you pushed the penny in the right direction. So whether it's you or somebody else that comes along, if they follow the blueprint that you had, they're probably going to do better, and eventually someone's going to win. It's a long-term strategy, which is something that unfortunately on the left we've been kind of lacking.
Yeah, agreed. And no, I think that is true. It's sort of what I was saying whenever I was on the show months ago, where I was talking about how we see how our more left-wing candidates, once they get into office, over a period of time, they sort of get their rough edges sanded off. And so the best strategy is to just keep having fresh blood get into office. In a certain way, the less people are concerned about their long-term career, the better. The more they want to ruffle feathers and change things and make an impact, the better.
Right.
There's those
term limits.
Yeah.
Term limits.
Well, again, her point is that not is okay. So the reason why their edges get worn down is because they're always concerned about being reelected.
Right.
And so her thing is, if you change the conversation and change the mindset of the voters, then the politicians are going to follow because they want to get reelected. So the focus we had, I mean, it's important. The candidates matter, but the electorate matters even more. And that's where also a lot of the grassroots thing. I know, like with Jack, Jack, you're very big on the grassroots stuff. With different, mutual aid and all this kind of stuff. That's
direct action. Don't ever forget that.
That's very important because again, that also changes people's minds. It changes the community.
The conversation that is being had on the left and the right today, often and more today, I think, than maybe in the past, It centers on freedom. And I think one of the problems that we're having here is we actually define freedom differently than the right. And that's become very clear through the pandemic.
And
what they call freedom, I call stupidity. But I mean, it's just a different definition.
Most right wingers will happily admit that they're very on the side of negative freedoms and not on the side of positive freedoms. And of course, I argue you really can't have one without the other. There's very few conditions where a positive freedom in one way doesn't cause a negative freedom in the other, and vice versa. And so even though there are those who would like to define their desire for freedom entirely in what the government cannot do, they are still participating in this conversation about what freedoms we get positively through that. And we're still battling basically on where that line between a positive and a negative freedom comes on each aspect that involves a state. So we probably need to push more at changing the conversation to show that those two things are intrinsically linked, because currently most of the right wing seems to at least superficially believe. I don't necessarily know that they actually believe this, but this is the principle that they'll espouse, that there is only negative freedoms, or we can have a conversation that only includes negative freedoms. And if we really push back on that idea and show where that is simply a moving line on a spectrum in every case, then there are a lot of people on the right who would also like to have health care.
So I was just going to say, I mean, Vegas says it all the time, that we are a lot closer on most issues than it seems like. Often it comes down to semantics, or the definition of freedom.
Right. Well, especially when I've talked about this many times, because right wingers, the mask mandate's a perfect example. It's a free country, and I have the freedom not to wear a mask. It's like, well, in some instances, that's true. In your own property or in a place where someone says you don't have to wear a mask, that's true. But on somebody else's private property, and see, it's weird. They would recognize their own sovereign right over their own private property to say you can or can't wear a mask, but they seem to ignore the fact that the other person has that same right. And then they come up with these bullshit excuses as to why their right is absolute and the other person's is not, and that doesn't work.
Well, we're always going to bump up against that, because ultimately, if you're talking about conservatism, the two most fundamental basic aspects of conservatism is some circling of the wagons around fear. There is a fear of something external that is kind of central to most conservatism, or all conservatism, I would argue. And then the second thing is there's going to be a little bit less empathy. And of course, that's a scale. There's plenty of fairly empathetic conservatives. Certainly, the empathy is well extended to people within their own tribe or their own friend group or their own family. And in some ways, conservatives have more empathy for people within their own family than people on the left do. There's sort of a different loyalty culture that you'll find. But if you're trying to really target or convince people to recognize other people's freedoms, you are always going to come up a little bit against that propensity for outsidering or othering people who aren't within that tribe.
See, one of the things I've done, because again, I try not to engage conservatives too many times anymore, but what I've done when I see people post this thing about, like, well, I've got a store and you can't come in, you can't wear a mask in my store, and I'll say, well, if that's your rules, that's your right to do that. And then other stores similarly have the right to say you can't come in without a mask. So, it's to try to put it in their perspective, like, hey, okay, you're a business owner and you set the rules. The same logic applies to everybody else.
Go ahead, Paul. I know you were.
I've
waiting.
lost my train of thought.
Oh,
So
I would just say
make
that
a point about something you were saying, but it's gone now. I can't remember it.
there's a little bit of a trick there in that when you're talking about whether you get to kick somebody out for wearing a mask, of course, it always comes up, are you able to kick somebody out for their skin color? And there is a social reason why it's important to obligate businesses to serve everyone. Uh, I think a pandemic is an odd case study because we have a circumstance that isn't the norm. It's certainly not the norm for humans, which are a social species. Gathering together is an important aspect.
Well, nobody's skin color can rub off on someone else, but you can get someone else infected with a deadly disease. So it's not a comparable sort of condition.
Right. Exactly.
What it seems like to me is that the argument from the left is about, your skin color can't rub off onto somebody else, but you can spread the disease, and that the left believes that the right feels like the mask is encroaching on their freedom, and I think all of that is bullshit. What I think is that the mask is symbolic. It's
sure.
symbol. That's why we're not having an argument or a discussion about it that really makes sense, is because we're talking about facts, we're talking about data, we're talking about saving your life, and they're talking about it is symbolic of the government coming in to tell you how to live and to take over your life.
You mean the same government that tells you where you can and can't smoke cigarettes, and the same government that forces you to wear a seatbelt in your car, right, even if you're the only occupant, and the same government that makes you want to wear a helmet on a motorcycle, even though you're the only person whose brains you can display. I mean, that government.
Or wear clothes in public.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, that's what it is, though. I mean, that's what it is. The latest thing is unmask our children. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous that people are demanding the right to put their children in danger. And the only reason for it is because they don't think the government should have a say in that.
Yeah. And you're right. And I was just talking earlier today, Raven, about that, how everything with the right is symbolism. It's all symbolism to them. Just like that's the reason why they liked Reagan. It's the reason why they like Trump. It has nothing to do with policy whatsoever. With Reagan, it was that painting someone did of him with his foot up on the ramparts, the shining beacon on the hill. And with Trump, it's he'll say whatever he wants, and he's so they view him as tough because they'll say, even though he's the most thin-skinned person I've ever witnessed in my life, but because from their perspective is that he's willing to say things that they're worried about saying and getting in trouble for. So it's that symbolism there, and then also because being rich and flaunting money around and stuff like that. It's all symbol. They don't give a fuck about policy.
It's also team sports. There's a little bit more tribalism. Obviously, we can see that the left is not very good at tribalism. We're really good at kicking people out of the tribe. That's sort of our shtick. Occasionally I'm a bit jealous of the fact that conservatives can kind of again circle the wagons around a message or a narrative or an idea and really
Okay, but I personally I agree that like historically the Republicans have been more cohesive in terms of unifying against perceived threats to whatever it is. Like when Reagan had the Iran-Contra thing, for example, I mean, they really circled the wagons there. But when we're talking about Trump, we're talking about a cult of personality. It's not the same thing at all. And I want to take the conversation a little, not a hard right, just a little bit, because like this cult of personality, people say, Trumpism doesn't necessarily depend on Trump. And I'm not so sure if I agree with that or not, because let's just say for the sake of argument, this is just a conversation. Nobody's wishing that this was to happen, but let's just say Trump had like a stroke on live TV tomorrow. Or in front of 10,000 people at one of his rallies. Look at Joe. Let's just say that happened, right? What are they going to do without their hero? Does the whole movement fall apart because There is nobody. There's no. I mean, I'm sorry, DeSantis or Abbott or Kirsty Noem, for Christ's sake, do not have anything close to the charisma that Trump had. And I hate Trump, but I have to acknowledge that he has a certain kind of charisma that appeals to enough people. Go ahead, Raven.
So I think there was a time when it was about Trump, but I think it has outgrown him. It's a monster that has its own will. And if he were to die tomorrow, it wouldn't make a difference. It's still this train is moving. With or without.
If he had a stroke and was in a semi-vegetative state, do you think people would still vote for him?
Wouldn't necessarily vote for him. They'll vote for because it doesn't. He is not. You don't need him for Trumpism to be a thing. He could die tomorrow, and Trumpism will survive. It is now a part of our body politic. It's not going anywhere. And if he were to be like in a coma and be in a vegetative state, yes, people would vote for him. They absolutely would vote for him. If he is dead, they might vote for him. We've had dead people get elected before in this country.
Well, basically, I think what ends up happening is with the right wing, it becomes like North Korea. Basically, he becomes Kim Il Sung, you know. The party dear leader who's still the leader of the party.
And I disagree with Vegas. Absolutely, Trump is going to run in 2024. Absolutely, he's going to run as number one. And number two, I've actually seen a politician have a stroke on television, and it's a frightening fucking thing to watch. Ron Paul, and if you guys have seen Ron Paul when he had the stroke on live TV, absolutely fucking frightening thing to watch. Absolutely. One of the scariest fucking things. I hate Ron Paul. But I was watching that and I felt so bad for him. I wanted to die while I was watching it because the man just went. He just went. I mean, it was frightening.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I think I personally, I guess I'm in a minority in the group here because I personally think that it would completely shake the foundations of the entire thing, and it would be so badly fragmented and traumatized that there would be no way that they could possibly unify behind a person or a particular message because they have no person and no message.
Trump
if Trump was just a symbol, but they still had a message.
Trump got booed at his own rally. Trump's followers booed him almost off the stage at his own rally. They lost their shit on him. So no, they don't need him anymore.
I mean,
that's an animal that's running on its own.
It's hard to say because I mean, to Paul's point, cults of personality generally don't outlive the person. I think we're going to kind of end up. I think it's going to end up in the middle. I think he will then become again the figurehead. He'll be the dead figurehead of the party, and the Republicans will try him out. The thing is, I don't think that it will grow. I think it'll live, but I don't think it'll grow.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I don't know if anyone else in this group follows the sort of internal workings of the QAnon conspiracy. But I will say, as somebody who does and has spoken on this before, the QAnon sort of movement is more than alive and well. It's pretty well thriving and it's mutating. It's largely excluding Trump from their conversation at this point. Trump is already a past figure. The people who still believe that some storm is coming or that there is some kind of, re-inauguration of Trump on the way or something are a diminishing group. But there are huge swaths of Americans who are living in an entirely different ecosystem from the rest of us.
It's Trumpism. It's Trumpism, and it doesn't.
Trumpism without Trump.
Yeah. It's really bizarre. It's really a mutation of the Tea Party, I think. At least some of it.
And Christianity. I mean, there are definite evangelical dominionist threads within the sort of QAnon milieu that. So,
I wanted to real quick about the Green Machine about Ron Paul's stroke. Has anybody seen it? Have you guys seen Ron Paul's when he stroked out on TV? Okay, so
I just watched it.
This is what it was like. He was speaking. Then as he was speaking, he started to talk gibberish. His words stopped making sense, and there were a lot fewer of them. his eyes kind of went dull, went kind of blank, and then his face started to contort, and it was frightening. Because it was like when you're watching it, you're like at that moment that's this man's brain just did a belly flop in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a thought. His brain just said, "Yeah, I don't work anymore. Good luck. You're on your own." Really scary. If you want,
because that could happen to anybody eventually.
Yeah, exactly. It was really scary, and if that's the kind of thing you want to watch, I would recommend that you go look it up. If it's not the kind of thing you want to watch, I'll tell you, once you see it, it kind of sticks with you, because I don't know if somebody having a stroke was caught so perfectly before on video. He was like on the screen, like right here, and it was like he was in the middle of a thought when he just said, yeah, that kind of stays with you. It was really frightening.
Yeah, that's not something I'm going to watch voluntarily.
When I want to say that links the Tea Party and QAnon and preppers, and the distinction between us newly formed left-wing prepper communalists, that we're going to have this network. We're going to have this network across the country where we're sharing with each other, is that the individualism is highly touted in these groups, in the Gravy Seals, the Meal Team 6 type. They really love their individualism, and they feel no sense of duty to everybody else. The word duty, although they would recognize it as an English word, they have no idea what it actually fucking means. They think that their only responsibility is to their own survival, and that if other people don't survive, that's okay if you got yours.
Which that attitude will, it's getting to what we were starting to talk about an hour and a half ago in this whole conversation. I mean, that attitude will certainly exist, but those people can't possibly thrive in the long scheme of things, not unless they just are like band together as marauders, because it depends on cooperation. This is one thing that's frustrated me my whole life is, individual responsibility and all that kind of stuff. As a philosophy, I totally am behind it. But at the same time, the naked truth is we all depend on each other. And so, you have to try and there has to be a balance.
And this is the reason why I've mentioned before, the people that are looking to everything to fly apart, I just have such contempt for them, because it's like, you can believe that you're going to go out there on your own and do whatever. And it's like, no, you're not going to, it's just not going to happen. And it's the thing. And if anything does survive, again, it would be from cooperation, not from a bunch of individuals going out there shooting at them.
I mean, the country is skating on some pretty thin ice. This is probably the most dangerous period of time our country has ever had. I would say since the Civil War, but probably actually this is a lot more dangerous for the survival of the country now than it was then. Because
how do you mean that, Raven?
If the South had succeeded in seceding, there would be two separate countries. But the United States, the North, would still exist as a nation. The Constitution would still be intact. There would still be the U.S. The route that we are heading, whether we get there in 2 years, 10 years, or 100 years, the road that we're on takes us to someplace that's very different, very, very, very different.
Well, our mutual acquaintance Brock Lawley, for his very first Breakfast Club guest video ever, posited the question, would it be prudent for the United States to break up into pockets where people basically shared similar interests? And I thought I understood where he's coming from, but I thought the idea is preposterous. You can never do that. Every time you try to separate peoples who have once shared common land, it's never worked out well, whether you're talking about in Palestine or India or South Africa or any place else. You know what I mean? So people just have to learn how to live together. And I don't understand why the emphasis is on segregation instead of the emphasis being on, like I say, to me, it's just a naked fact that we depend on each other and we have to try to get along.
Right. But again, there's a very large number of people in this country that have decided that you're wrong.
I get that. I get that. It keeps me up at night.
One of the problems with your approach, and it's not that I necessarily disagree on that we all need to learn how to get along, but one of the problems is just by saying that you are basically shining a great big beacon on yourself that you are the enemy.
Well, see, one thing
I'm triggering them, eh?
One thing that gets me is that, if they got their way, just say the country did split up and we said, okay, the big chunk in the middle, you're whatever you are, dumb fucking Stan, and we got the East Coast and the West Coast. Because of
it would be 6 countries there's maps about the 6.
Okay, well, however, how many it ends up being, that basically, their right-wing bullshit is not sustainable. I mean, we know Kansas almost fell into the fucking abyss after 3 years. And they were still connected to the United States, So if they were actually on their own, they would not survive.
And we have the example recently of the Texas power grid as well.
Right. Again, how basically libertarian ideals in practice never work. Meaning right-wing libertarian, for Paul's benefit.
I wish I could find it. There was this rant that was floating around on social media, Facebook, a couple of years ago. It's this rant. This guy just wrote this thing. He went off about the South, and he was just like, the South is always bashing the Northeast and talking about the liberal states and the liberal cities and how bad they are. He's like, well, fuck you. If you come up here, what do you see when you come up here? You see all of the statues of the founding fathers. You see all the places that are named after them. Do you know why? Because this is where freedom was fucking born, motherfuckers. And it's just like, it's this fantastic rant that just, just goes off about the South and about how the North is the birthplace of American freedom. And I got to find it. I was just looking for it. I can't find it. If I can find it, I will post it on Facebook. It's fantastic.
And that's similar to what I get pissed off about is, most of the red states take more in federal spending than their citizens put in. So they're always talking about, the living off the federal teat. It's like, well, then stop doing it, motherfucker. Stop doing it. I'm more than happy for them to live within their state's means and don't spend more federal dollars than you contribute. And New Jersey would be great. We would be floating in cash because we get back like 57 cents to every dollar. So we'd be sitting pretty. And it's interesting that none of them really noticed that, because of the largesse of mostly the liberal states, that so they think our ways are so bad, but then why are we the richest states? And on a per capita basis, we're the richest states.
On a slightly different note, I just want to express my frustration at the. I'm not sure if it's theatrics or gridlock or what the fuck is going on with the Democrats in Congress, but this brinkmanship is going to end up sinking the whole goddamn boat. And at what point?
I found it.
Go ahead.
I found it. If you guys want to hear some of it,
drop the link in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Or drop it in the private chat, and I'll drop it in the main chat.
Fan-fucking-tastic. Is that it? Yeah, I think that's it.
You got that, Joe?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I like the title.
Well, to your point, Paul. So you're talking about both the Manchin wing and the AOC wing, and everybody fighting over what we should or shouldn't do.
Well, I mean, there's Pramila Jayapal's the leader of a caucus of 90 some odd Democrats in the House who are not going to vote on the one thing until the other thing goes through. It's supposed to go through at the same time. And they made this agreement a month ago. They basically kicked it into the long grass. And it seems to me, from what I've observed on the media anyway, that both sides are going, oh, don't worry, they won't let it sink. And they're going to mutually blame the other side.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know what to say. It's brinkmanship that's just gone way too far. And of course, the Republican obstructionism is unforgivable as well. But that's a whole different subject.
Yeah. It's the left wing circular firing squad. We you know, and it pisses me off because we're just say 75% in agreement, 85% in agreement, whatever the exact number, I don't care. But there's a big chunk of stuff we all agree on. And we just can't seem to get our shit together. And I said earlier today, actually at the conference here, that our diversity on the one hand is a strength, but it's also a weakness because we have so many different factions with different thoughts. And the difference is we are more proprietary than the right wing. The right wing understands the strategy, and they'll tamp down and they'll vote for a motherfucker they hate as long as the long-term goal is being achieved. But we have to do this picking up our toys and leaving bullshit. And it fucking, and I've been saying this shit for fucking ages. So like going back into the 90s, and it's very frustrating. It's like, look, like there's stuff that just say that the progressives want that I'm not particularly for. But if I was there and the bill came up, I'm voting for their shit whether I agree with it or not. I'm giving it to them because I want to fucking get the error because I want the rest of it. Because compromise is not a dirty word. We have to compromise within the caucus and give each other what we want so we can get all of the shit.
Go ahead, Raven. What were you going to say?
I think everybody in the chat should go read that. I'm serious. Read that. That is fan-fucking-tastic. And if you live in the South, I'm sorry. My condolences. But read that. That's number one. Number two, I don't know. That's all I got.
What were you just saying a second ago, Joe? Because I was going to make a point, but...
Well, I was just saying that, like within the caucus, like there seems to be this idea that.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. Thank you. You reminded me. Thank you. I just need to get. So, Joe, you're what I would call a moderate liberal. Okay.
Yeah.
But people in the media keep calling Cinema and Manchin moderates. They're not moderates. They're freaking conservatives. They're
right.
conservative Democrats. They're not moderate at all.
Moderate is code. We have two right-wing parties in this country, and so when they say moderate, they mean within that spectrum. So you're really going to be talking about people who are on the conservative end, or even the right-wing end. And I know it's been said before on the show that right-wing, conservative, and Republican are not synonyms, any more than Democrat. Leftist and liberal are synonyms. But they certainly do have a little bit more of a coalition built than we do.
Yeah.
Just to Joe's point from earlier.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing about it is, so the person I was talking to today, we're talking about Manchin. So her point was, again, try to get the electorate in West Virginia to be different. Secondly, like I had said in previous weeks, primarying out Joe Manchin is not going to achieve anything because as much as I can't stand him, I don't believe anyone further to the left or toward the left or less conservative than him, maybe I'll put it that way, it could win in at least currently.
Well, that's really open to debate. We don't know. Like things about what the electorate will do and is like are all speculation, and it's kind of
it's not completely speculation either. I mean,
there's a lot of sort of common general wisdom that really doesn't hold up.
General wisdom would have said that Joe Biden would not win Georgia.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
but Georgia's been trending purple though for a while.
Sure, but general wisdom. I mean, I literally had these exact arguments with people on the internet. People saying, "Oh, California and Georgia never vote the same way," and they have loads of times.
The Republican candidate for president gets like 71% in West Virginia. We do know what the electorate there is like.
I mean, it's been said a
we also
million
know-
times that the general wisdom when it comes to the electorate doesn't really apply in West Virginia. That West Virginian voters are a different type, and they vote a very specific way on purpose that goes against what is considered normal. Like a state that's going to elect 70% to the Republican president. Is going to have a senator that's a Democrat doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But Joe Manchin has been reelected, right? I mean, he's not new. He's not a freshman senator.
Right.
So they know what they're getting and they're voting for him.
Right.
Despite the fact that they're a Republican, right-wing, bright red state, they're voting for him. Because I believe that in West Virginia, the thinking is they like splitting up their vote. They split up their vote as much as they can in order to create the kind of gridlock that we have.
I just want to point out that according to this, Bernie Sanders was very popular in West Virginia in 2016. West Virginia does respond to populism, and whether or not the progressives can put up a candidate who is going to actually speak to working class people is a real question. And whether
it was interesting in 2016, one thing I found really interesting was I saw more Democrats say that they would not vote for Bernie Sanders than I saw anything else. Like there were Republicans that were willing to vote for Bernie Sanders. There were Republicans in Vermont, and I know Vermont is a special animal because it's Vermont, and we've talked about this before, but they had a poll during the primary season of who people in Vermont were supporting for president for the Republicans in Vermont. And the Republicans in Vermont wanted Bernie Sanders. That's who they were supporting as the Republican candidate for president.
Right.
So I mean, it's like he had this broad appeal that's different than anyone else.
Right. Well, here's a question though, Jack. Can we quantify very popular? Because that's a very nebulous term.
Well, sure. So he got 18 delegates to Hillary Clinton's 11.
Right, but you're talking within the party, though. I'm talking about how do we quantify that along the whole state? Because
I mean, I don't have all of the, but I can probably look that up.
So I guess what we'll say is he would probably pull more Democratic voters out than Hillary would have in the general election, but that doesn't mean that he would have won the state.
Right, but what we're talking about is what types of ideas West Virginians might respond to. And the thing I'm looking up right now is whether or not it's an open primary or was an open primary in 2016, because I failed to note that before closing the tab. My point about whether or not Joe Manchin or another Democrat could win, there's 2 points I'll make quick. The first one is the Democratic Party has really failed to appeal to people in the way it historically did, which was about unions, about worker power, about solidarity, about, lifting people up financially, and not business owners or wooing Amazon to come to New York or the other various things that the Democratic Party has sort of become recently. And I think it's very difficult to know exactly what West Virginia would respond to, but this does bring me to my second point, which is the reason the Tea Party was so successful is because they were willing to primary their own sort of moderate by GOP standards conservative Republicans with a more right-wing version of that. And I am always going to...
Right, but where did they first start winning? They weren't winning in New York State or New Jersey or Connecticut. They were working. It was out in the ultra red places.
Sure, but they were very successful, and they were successful because they were offering their electorate something that they wanted.
Right.
Now, I would say that wasn't good for the country, but it was certainly a strategy that's a lot more successful than continually ratcheting more toward the so-called moderate.
Well, right, but see, the thing is,
right.
But I want to give you the equivalent on the left. AOC, for instance, she won in a very blue district, so that's the place to get. That's to me the place to get more progressives in those places where a Democrat, if they got the D next to their name, they're going to win. So getting more progressives into the party, into Congress, again, it shifts the discussion in that direction. So
I disagree. I think get as left wing a candidate as you can in every state in the nation. Push them across the board, regardless, because the losses that you might have in West Virginia are made up for the close races that you have in other states, where an electorate who has not been catered to in 40 years finally has an actual candidate that is on their side. You're going to have a lot better voter turnout if you're going to project yourself as like actually being there to work on behalf of the things that the voters are looking for you to work on behalf of, rather than these sort of mealy mouth, we will sort of work with the other side and we'll be, good little whipped moderate conservative Democrats to this, larger system. People don't want to see more, bank bailouts and the kinds of things that have kind of brought us to this position where people have felt left behind for a really long time. That's the electorate that either doesn't show up to vote for Hillary Clinton and stays home because they don't feel represented, or upset that the Democratic Party whittles Bernie out of the primary so that they never have a chance to vote for somebody that they actually want to vote for. Go ahead, Paul.
That's fine. Thank you. Okay. Obviously, I'm going to let Michael go first because I want to respond to a comment in the thread. So, Michael, what are we going to say?
So with Joe Manchin in place for, say, his entire lifetime, the next 30 years, would we have a better shot at passing Democratic legislation with that in the picture, or having every other term be filled with a Republican and then a radical Democrat? Because with him in office, we are getting 0% done. Because every time we get our shit together and we want to pass something, he's the one holding up the shit saying, oh, wait, let's water that down so that it's meaningless.
You could almost be forgiven for thinking he was a Republican fucking shill. But I just want to address this comment. So, oops, hang on. I think I fucked it up. Let's try that again. Because, it leads directly on from what Michael was just saying. How much worse would a Republican be than Manchin? Well, 1,000% worse, in my opinion, if for no other reason that they would have a majority in the Senate, the gridlock would be permanent, and they would deny every single judge that Joe Biden tried to appoint, thereby giving more judges to appoint for the next time they hopefully get their guy in. It would be obstruction on steroids.
Right.
So
but that's not going to.
No. Let me finish because this is a point I started to make before and I got interrupted 4 times.
Yeah.
Is that my point is now Manchin's not up for re-election until 2024, but there are a number of vulnerable Republicans in the Senate. For instance, like Pat Toomey is retiring. Fetterman has a very good chance of taking that seat. So if the Democrats expand their majority in the Senate, then Joe Manchin becomes irrelevant.
And he'll fall in line.
Fall in line.
When there's no chance that his obstruction could water down shit, he'll just fall in line. But in the numbers game right now, where he is the linchpin, the very last vote that we need, he fucks things up. If not him, it's Sinema. We need 2 more Democratic senators in order to get rid of both of them.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it last week a little bit. We talked about Manchin was on TV in his home state, bashing a program that's helping the majority of the people in his state, saying that he doesn't, that there aren't enough qualifications in order to get it. And that was the child tax credit. They're just giving it to anybody with kids. I mean, there's no work qualification for it. There's no, of course not. It's a tax credit. Right. But he's bashing something that, number 1, is working. And number 2 is paid for. And number 3, most of the people in his state are getting it.
And it's actually popular.
And it's popular, and he's attacking it. And it's like, you're the stupidest politician I think I've ever seen. And I don't think he's going to win again in his state. I think they're going to get rid of him. And I think it's going to be because of that.
Because of all his obstructionism, you mean?
Well, I mean, not so much the obstructionism, more of an intentionally not looking out for his own people.
Oh, right.
He's not looking out. He is
um,
using his position as the linchpin to fight against things that people in his state are enjoying.
Yeah. Also, primaries in West Virginia are open primaries. 23% of the electorate is not affiliated with a party. And Bernie Sanders won West Virginia in 2016 primaries by 51%. So I think that speaks to my point that a more progressive candidate, one who responds to the needs of West Virginians, unlike Joe Manchin, would be successful in West Virginia. And I think he should be primaried.
I think there's a strong argument.
I was going to say that's a fair. I'll acknowledge that, and that's a fair point, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, what's his name? Richard Ojeda. He was from West Virginia, and he didn't win, of course, but he did better than anyone expected for someone who basically had no funding, you know. And
see, that was one of the reasons why I didn't think that anybody more progressive than Manchin could win, because Ojeda is in the mold of Bernie, and he didn't win.
Jetta's a weird candidate because he's more Trumpian in some ways. You know, he would curse at people. He was very combative and belligerent. He would make fun of people and insult people. I mean, in terms of his political style, he has some of that sort of Trump energy, while his politics or his policy positions tend to be much closer to Bernie, or even to the left of Bernie in certain ways. So
I think there are a lot of Jack. I think there are a lot of places that policy positions that are close to Bernie's, and a personality like Trump gets you really far in this country. A lot of places. I think that's exactly what a lot of people would be looking for.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens for Ojeda in the future. He's still, quite a bulldog on Twitter, and I expect he will run for something again. I haven't heard him announce anything, but he's still out there kind of with fisticuffs. It would be interesting to see if there were more people like him. I'm very in favor of more people of that sort of just very, maybe not belligerently progressive, but strongly and vociferously progressive, and very leftist, getting into office or trying to get into office, because as Joe and I have talked about before, like, you do kind of have to have both things happening at once. You need the people in the streets, and you need the direct action, and you need people getting into office. And
I guess Ojeda, he lost the primary, but he did reasonably well. He got 32.9%, and the winner of the primary got 38.3%. It would be interesting to see if the West Virginia Democrats were to go to either ranked choice voting or pass-fail voting, if he might have a chance that way. Because that's one thing, I don't know if you had heard about this. It's a type of ranked choice, but it's an alternate type of voting. It's an instant runoff voting. But what they do is, instead of ranking them, you just say yes or no for each candidate. So basically, you vote yes for any candidate you're willing to abide, and then whoever gets the most yes votes is the winner.
I like that a lot, because it really simplifies the main problem with ranked choice voting, which is that it's confusing. Right. I mean, we just had that recall election for Gavin Newsom in California, which was essentially a weird form of a very broken form of ranked choice voting, where someone could theoretically get into office with 18% of the vote after defeating a governor, who only gets 49% of the vote. So I'm always happy to see things be less confusing, and I'm very interested to see more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. When I first heard it, I'm like, wow, this is so much simpler. And then you don't have to get into, well, this person before that person. You just say, hey, these are the 5 people I'm willing to put up with, and go along with the others. And I think that would really be good, particularly in the primaries. I think that would really open things up for all, for candidates of, all stripes, and particularly in an open primary. Now, was that open primary in West Virginia? Was it where you were voting for all the candidates for both parties at the same time, or was it just that anybody could vote in the Democratic and anybody could vote in the Republican?
It appears that it was, that there were two primaries, because the caucus days or the primary voting days were held on different days. But yes, so it would depend on turnout. I'm sure there are people who voted in the first primary who thought that's all the voting I have to do and don't go vote in the second primary.
Right.
So there's plenty of, and I keep closing that tab because I think I'm not going to need it anymore. But whether or not, I'd be curious which of the two primaries happened first. I don't know if anybody else has that tab open.
Yeah, I don't either.
I just wanted to interject about something that Jack mentioned a couple of minutes ago about California, and the fact that you could have had someone with a significantly small plurality, like 18, 20% or whatever, become the governor, despite having what you said. Basically, I'm not going to reiterate. The whole point is that was terrifying. And I'm glad it went the way it did. But is anyone in California legislative structure scrambling to change that so that can't ever fucking happen again?
No, of course.
Because that should not be a possibility. That is nakedly undemocratic, right? And I can't believe it ever was set up in the first place. It's not even archaic. It's just plain weird. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Everything is weird.
It doesn't make any sense at all, though. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah. And why aren't they trying to fix it? They need to come up with a better system. Something. Anything's better than that.
It's California. They don't think it's broken. Hey, Vegas,
California,
There you go, Vegas. Not only does the right pick on California, so does the left.
Yeah, Elder. I don't think Elder was ever going to win, but I mean, an Elder. I mean, I'll tell you. I mean, some of this shit, like basically saying that, poor George Martin, because he can't. He's like, he can't go places without being harassed. I'm like, dude, he goes to conventions and signs packages of Skittles. He's a fucking scumbag. He auctioned off the gun he killed the kid with for a big sum of money. Like, how are you defending this guy? So he's had his card pulled. He's not black anymore. So I won't use the word that we have for people like him, because I don't want us to get kicked off of the stream. But I'll put it in the private chat and use the word Paul's heard the word. I'm sure he's old enough to know the word. But
it's funny. Vegas says if Elder had won, Feinstein would have died. I think whoever wins, Feinstein's days are end of her days are probably close at hand. She's quite old and clearly not in great health.
Right. In my opinion, she shouldn't have ran for re-election last time in the first place. She's had a great run. She's had a career which I think is respectable, at least, if you're not down with everything. You know what I mean? And yeah, why not move over? It's not just her, but there's a whole bunch of very elderly statespeople in the Democrats' side of the House of Representatives, and they really need to step aside. For a different generation, because the different generation of the electorate,
Well, just like Ginsburg, I mean, she deserves a little bit of at least some culpability for that last justice that Trump got, because she had the arrogance to say, well, who could you replace me with? I'm like, you're going to be replaced eventually, that. So why are you playing this fucking game? The arrogance. I'm like, so I won't say it destroyed her entire legacy, but it sure as hell put a hurting on it.
Do you feel that way about Breyer?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Breyer looks to be retiring soon.
Good.
Yeah, I think
Because-
judges need to have enough humility to retire when they're showing their age. There are people who, for whatever reason, don't have that humility and don't see themselves as being infirm. And I guess I can kind of understand from a subjective point of view. That looks delicious. By the way, both
really.
primaries did happen on the same day in 2016, May 10th.
So, I mean,
Just a
Ginsburg,
correction.
on Ginsburg's deathbed, she basically requested that she not be replaced by that current administration. The fuck was she thinking?
Yeah.
Like
I'm
they're
sorry.
gonna listen
I
to
mean,
her.
when I heard, I would say, "Hey, nobody is going to honor that. No way in hell."
I don't remember where I read it, but I was shocked to learn recently. I think it's since 1970. Only 4 Supreme Court justices have been appointed by Democratic presidents. And that's appalling because the split between Democratic and Republican presidents over the same time period is roughly equal. I think it was like 26 to 28 years or something like that. I can't remember what, 24 rather. But, it's close. And
Yeah, I want to disagree with Green Machine here, because
Same.
because it would have been much earlier in his term. So I do not believe that that's what's his name would have gotten away with it. Actually, if you remember when Obama first took office, he actually had both the House and the Senate for 2 years. So if she had stepped down then, he could have replaced her. So you are incorrect. And if you remember, he also did replace he put Sotomayor on, so he replaced somebody else. I forget who it was, but he replaced somebody else. So you are already defeated by what actually happened earlier in his term.
It also, I mean, I would say that Ginsburg had some responsibility to do that. I don't know what her state was or anything, but there is a moral obligation to let a new generation take over, especially if you're that elderly.
hands up, everybody who thinks there should be term limits on Supreme Court membership. Why or why not?
I think that there should be a maximum of 16 years. That was one of the things that Andrew Yang suggested, and it's one of the things that I agree with him on. I don't believe that term limits on any office should necessarily be shorter than that. I'm not somebody who believes that people need to, be kicked out of office really quick. I think a lot of jobs in government are difficult and people need a lot of time to get good at them. But I think 16 years is a pretty good number. All that said, my history, I'm not particularly comfortable with the idea of mandating stretches of time for any people in office. I'd much rather see a healthier recall system for all offices to get people out of office if they're bad candidates earlier.
But since you don't get on the Supreme Court through democratic means, in the sense that the people don't put them there, don't you think it makes as far as I remember, I mean, it's been a long time since I went to school and learned about this stuff, and I haven't really learned too much more about it since then, but I thought the whole logic behind lifetime appointments, I mean, for one thing, lifetime appointment meant something different back then.
Yeah.
People didn't tend to live to be 80 or whatever, 87, whatever, or certainly sit on the bench that long. But I mean, is you're less likely to be corrupted if you have a lifetime appointment, because
how'd that
you're
theory
not
work out?
Political. Yeah, I mean, you run the risk of politicizing the court if there are term limits. And obviously that's happened anyway. And it's happened because of what Mitch McConnell did to Obama. And that's what really did it. He knew what he was doing. I mean, he set it up knowing that the court would eventually go almost completely conservative, partly because of the ages of the people involved. But I don't think there should.
Partly happened. Oh, sorry, just real quick. Partly the whole problem is was it Harry Reid that made it so you could get a Supreme Court justice on with a simple majority instead of 60 votes. And the whole point of, 60 votes really makes sense when it comes to appointing a Supreme Court justice, because that way you have to accommodate the other side a little bit. You can't get someone too extreme if you have to come up
Right.
with an accommodation, right?
Well, I agree. The problem with that, with your argument on that, and forgive me, but the problem with that is until Mitch McConnell pulled his bullshit, pretty much every single person that was nominated got an overwhelming majority. There was never an issue of it being politicized. As far as confirming justices, until McConnell pulled the bullshit he pulled with Obama. After that, all the rules were out the window, and it didn't seem to matter anymore. But now I don't think there should be
further back than that. I think it started with Reagan.
I just want to answer your question. So I don't think there should be term limits, because it would keep because we could save the court. It could be depoliticized. It'll take time, but it can happen. But if there are term limits, that's never going to happen. It'll always be political. So I think there should be an age limit, not so much a term limit.
I'm not opposed to an age limit, although obviously people have totally different capacities at different ages, based on a whole wide variety of things. So it might not actually be fair to kick people
But
off.
it would still be better than life. It would still be better than having a bunch of 90-year-olds on the court.
Agreed. But I think that the counter to the 16-year term limits is, at one point it was suggested that the court should be 29 justices. And I think that there's good reason to have a larger body of justices who individually serve shorter terms. We might get something that is equally above politics, especially if you can have a wider variety of views. One of our biggest problems with the two-party system is that whether or not people, obviously we have all kinds of variety of ideology among us. Just here on the panel, we have some variety, but like nationwide, there's a tremendous amount of variety. And yet we're all funneled down into two parties that we have to vote for.
Right,
if
but
we had a wider variety of ideologies on the court, just with a larger number of members, we might get something that more approximates what the American sort of political ethics is, as in the Gestalt.
Well, remember though, we did used to have more parties, and we did have. If you look, basically the elections between like 1860 and 1900, there was always at least 3 candidates that got significant number of electoral votes, and in some cases 4. But the parties consolidated because then what was happening is somebody with a plurality would win and not a majority. So I think that it would be good. I think it would be good if we had 3 or 4 or 5 parties that were viable. The part of the problem, though, is that the parties we have, like the extra parties we have right now, most of them are fucking idiots or batshit crazy, and they are not viable political entities. And they only ever seem to focus on the presidency, which, as I've mentioned several times before, is lunacy. And if they actually did grassroots and started at like the local and state level, they could actually build a coalition. But they're never going to do this with this pie in the sky, quixotic, run on the presidency. It's just never going to happen.
What I think needs to happen is, like Jack said, we need to expand the court, but in response to McConnell's screwery. Like, they fucked with the rules. They led one way and then did the other thing. They fucked the country. And what needs to happen is we need to unfuck it by adding more justices to the Supreme Court.
Well, the other thing too, at one time it used to be that there was one justice on the court for every circuit court, for every circuit, and then that stopped being the case. But so I think
13.
Yeah, 13. There's
There's
13
13.
circuits. And then when another point, it was like one for every circuit plus one. So there should be 13. There should be 13 or 14 justices right now. So it would be within precedent to do so.
Well, I think it should be an odd number. Just saying, we don't want any ties.
Yeah. For that matter, same thing with the House of Representatives. I mean, in addition, beyond the fact that, since every state gets the 2 electors for the 2 Senate positions, there's rounding errors on the House because of the chunk size we've chosen. But if we chose a smaller chunk per representative, and had a lot more representatives, the imbalance wouldn't be anywhere near as bad as it is.
I also actually think the U.S. territory should have voting representation in Congress. It's mind-boggling to me that that's not a thing. That there are people that we consider Americans, that we call Americans, that we say have the rights of Americans, but have no representation at all. And we can basically just shit all over them.
We have no
Or when they need help, throw paper towels at them.
Right.
We also need tribal representation for various native nations. I think it's incredible that we have a system. We have some diplomats, and we have some sort of weird halfway to representative.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of the natives are supposed to be sovereign. No, I mean that's one of the things with them is that they're sovereign. It's a sovereign nation. But none of that ever really seemed to matter to us. We still, poison their water and dig up their land and take their land away around anyway. Right.
Right.
So so much for sovereignty.
And prevent them from arresting people who aren't natives to the native land, who commit crimes on native land, which is the most fucked up thing I could ever think of.
But didn't they just?
That's what sovereignty is.
The Supreme Court didn't they just last year or 2 years ago, something like that? Didn't they just basically say that the tribes actually have the right? There's a big giant chunk of like the middle of the country now that it's just like that's Indian land. Yeah, that's
roughly 66% of Oklahoma was given to Native Americans in treaties, and those treaties are very explicit, and that's what the Supreme Court.
But it ruled not that it's their land though. It ruled that they have jurisdiction legally over people I need to arrest. Where that creates like a dual police force for those areas, the Native police and the Oklahoma authorities.
One of those police forces
doesn't give them their land back,
resourced.
Yeah, but it doesn't give them their land back though.
Right.
It's another halfway job.
Even if somehow Native Americans were given back the land, they wouldn't be able to do whatever they wanted with it. They'd just be expected to take revenue from it, and that's the only benefit from that. Well, let me just say real quick as well. So I don't have a link for it, unfortunately, and I don't know the title, but somewhere on YouTube there's a short video that shows the Native American reservations from the mid 1800s until now, and you just watch them all shrink, in a time lapse thing. It's really, really devastatingly sad to see what was once promised them. Like you say, Jack, they had very specific language, things like this land is yours as long as the sun shines and all that kind of thing. Which is pretty hard to refute with eminent domain, but that's, there's oil on your land. Here, move over here instead.
Well, what gets me is I've had people say to me stuff like, well, when are we going to be done paying for the crime done against the natives? I'm like, when the crime stops, for one. You can't be absolved of a crime that's still ongoing. It's like we are in abeyance of all of those treaties. So we're literally breaking our own laws, because that's the thing. Those treaties are actually law, and we're breaking our own laws with regard to the indigenous people.
I remember in the 1980s when Reagan and Gorbachev were talking quite a bit. The United States treatment of and attitude towards the Native American population, the official versus the reality of, you know, what was actually happening. The Soviets used to use that as an example of why we don't know what's going on with our own laws in our own country. You know, that we're not as free as we think we are, because the natives
the treatment of the natives by this country does still come up in international discussion. It still comes up. It is definitely something when we go and tell other countries about how to treat people or start preaching about human rights. I think that other countries are absolutely justified to bring that up and be like, "Are you serious?" You know, you've got an entire race. You have an entire ethnicity. You have this entire demographic of people that are citizens of your country who are not citizens of your country. You have a problem.
Right.
Don't come here talking to us.
It certainly complicates any critique we have of Israel and its treatment of Palestinians.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, and considering they're never going to get their land back, and that they're supposed to be sovereign, but they're not sovereign, and that I don't know about all, but a lot of the tribes vote in elections, which makes them citizens. Then they should have more representation in Congress, and it's incredible that they don't. I mean, if we're not going to do right by them, at least give them fucking something.
Right.
Well, if you think about it, it's kind of amazing that for the first time, it's the first time that we've ever had a Native American in charge of the Department of the Interior, which oversees the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
When she got confirmed for that, I was just like over the moon for her. You know what I mean? I was just I'm like, unbelievable. A native is in charge of Native affairs. Fan-fucking-tastic. It's about time.
Yeah, right.
Jack, was that the acoustics of the reverb of porcelain?
I'm sorry?
I could barely hear Joe.
That was Joe.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Breakfast Club first.
He's making a joke about where Joe is speaking from.
No, I am folding laundry.
Okay.
I'm in a
Nice
hotel.
euphemism, Joe.
No, I'm in a hotel room, and I've been traveling for the last 9 days, and I had to do quite a bit of laundry. So I want to fold it while it's still warm, so it won't be all wrinkled.
Thanks for embarrassing him, Michael.
Yeah, Michael.
I'm just saying, as an addiction counselor, I've had to oversee a lot of urinalysis. I'm pretty much the subject matter expert on what is or is not a fake penis, and what I'm hearing sounds like the echo of a toilet.
Yeah.
I'm not in the toilet.
I fold laundry too.
See, here's my shirt.
Well, I mean, I've been modeling in CAD software for the entire stream anyway, so that's we are all doing other things, or many of us are doing other things. You should be doing other things.
I was eating pizza better than Giordano's.
That pizza looks awful.
Michael saw my post.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried Gino's East versus Giordano's, and Gino's East wins hands down. So tomorrow I'm having Lou Malnati's, and I might pick up Pizzeria Due, and then compare those two.
We don't have Gino's East, but we do have Giordano's. It's a chain. We have 3 of them here in Denver.
Wow.
And it's not hard to beat.
I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's good, but it's just not as good as Gino's. You know, I wasn't. It didn't make me sad or anything.
Well, you know, look at it this way. None of us are in St. Louis, so we don't have to deal with St. Louis pizza. I just learned that there's a such thing as Altoona style pizza.
Oh
And it
God.
makes me hate Pennsylvania more than I already do.
What the hell is Altoona style?
Altoona is square pieces of like a round pizza cut into squares, the same way they do it in St. Louis, which is just weird because you end up with little tiny triangles at the edges. But the squares have a very specific size, and it's because the cheese they use is American singles.
Ew.
Yeah.
That's wretched.
Wait,
That should-
Green Machine asked what St. Louis pizza is like. So St. Louis has a local cheese food, processed cheese food called Promel. And Promel is sort of almost like if you took a little bit of cream cheese and cheddar and tried to get them to work together somehow. It's a very gooey, very slimy, kind of algae-like cheese, I would say.
Algae.
And they make this on a very thin crust. It's more like a saltine cracker that's round. They do very minimal sauce and then all the toppings you'd kind of expect on top of the cheese, but they cut it into these little squares that are like 2.5 inches on a side. And
Why?
it's just the worst pizza I have ever had in my life. It made me completely disgusted to even be in the vicinity of St. Louis. And I apologize to anyone who lives there in our audience.
Marcus, I grew up poor. I still knew what good pizza was.
Yeah. I mean, basically something like that, like an Italian, any Sicilian or Italian driving through should be allowed to beat up the people who make it.
They have these local pizzerias all over St. Louis, and they they proudly promote that they use Promel cheese, and
Yeah.
I've never had anything that was less like pizza in my life.
I don't like St. Louis pizza. I have to admit, I really don't. But and I'm not crazy about the toasted raviolis, but they're very proud of their toasted raviolis in St. Louis. That's for sure.
Is that like baked raviolis? I've had that. That's actually not bad.
They're quite sort of crispy and but they're lovely. They taste great. But I mean, I don't know.
So like, okay, so New York City, people talk about like New Jersey. New Jersey is, I'm sorry, pizza capital of the world. The best pizza you're going to get in the U.S. is in New Jersey. That's number one. Number two, people always talk about New York pizza. Now, just because you get pizza in New York doesn't mean it's going to be good. There's this thing in New York City called dollar pizza. It's absolute fucking garbage.
Sounds like it.
But there's like a million of them all over the city. There's like 2 of them on every single block.
Oh yeah, no, the dollar slices, I won't say that they're terrible because I quite enjoyed my time in New York.
Yeah.
And the dollar slices were a great way to get a $2 lunch, that and a soda.
Yes.
And
it's still awful.
Working in the theater district late hours, it was nice to be able to go at 11 p.m. to a corner, and there would still be a very long line. And I'll say one other thing about the dollar slice pizza is that it's fresh because they started making it like 6 people ahead of you in line.
Right.
They are making them as fast as they can.
Well, and the thing is, there are some decent dollar pizza places. There's one in Chelsea. Actually, Raven, remember the hotel we had in when we did the New York meetup?
Yeah.
And there was a pizza place that was catty corner to us.
Yeah, it was okay.
That turned into a dollar pizza. It's actually it was actually decent.
Oh, okay. I wasn't there since it was that. I was there when we were there, and it was a pizza place,
right.
And it was all right. It wasn't great pizza then. It was all right.
It was passable.
Yeah. I think the place I went to, it was, I don't know how well you guys know Manhattan and the theater district. I was working around 42nd Street, and I believe the pizza place was, within a couple blocks of me. So I'm not quite sure where it was, but it was off of Times Square by a few blocks.
There are a few. There's more than a few pizza places in that radius.
I'm sure there are. Yeah. One thing I know for sure is it was by the weirdest hardware store I've ever been into. I didn't realize that Manhattan doesn't really have hardware stores like properly. They had a weird sort of like long, deep hallway with tall ceilings and random shelves covered in shit and stacked on the floor. And it looked like if Harry Potter universe had a hardware store.
There's lots of weird little places like that all over the city.
Yeah, that's pretty common.
So Joe, here's an idea for a trip.
Okay.
Since we're talking about Italian food and the rest of the country, who apparently know nothing about Italian food, the face you made was good. So here's my idea. We go around the country and we get calzones. And we beat the shit out of anybody who does it wrong.
I like it.
We've beaten a lot of people's asses.
Yeah, it's
because I've heard calzone horror stories from all over the country.
It is not a fucking folded pizza like some people think.
Yeah, I couldn't believe. You remember that? That was that was in my blog TV. That conversation came up. Dude was like, "Oh, it's just a folded pizza."
Like,
that's somebody who wants to get their ass kicked.
I don't know if there's too many things that quite match it, but there's I forget what those pockets in Jamaica are.
Oh, the meat pies.
Yeah, those are pretty similar to what a proper calzone is in some ways, or maybe like certain pierogies or something. But like people really have to understand that it's about like a large amount of filling, and there's not really that much crust.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, and the other thing too is that there's a lot of people don't know the difference. Also, is between a calzone and a sausage roll,
and a stromboli.
And a stromboli, right? Because calzones invariably have ricotta cheese, and stromboli generally do not.
Right. And no, it's not a folded pizza. It's a different kind of everything.
What's the thing? Yeah, the dough. The dough is different, and
if the dough is the same, but yeah, the dough on all of that stuff, that's all the same.
Marinara is the same.
Yeah, probably.
The
cheese is different.
Generally speaking, a calzone does not have tomato sauce inside.
Not in it. It comes with it on the side.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, there's a couple of ingredients, at least. Probably the black olives, some mushrooms. There's a few things you can put it in a calzone that you will also find on a pizza.
Sure.
And that is typically the way of most like ethnic foods, is that you'll have a relatively narrow set of ingredients that go into most of
Italian food in general. I mean, it's just kind of in general. There's 40 different ways to assemble the same ingredients. Yeah,
Italian food is basically like the same 12 ingredients in different combinations.
Yeah. Well, same thing with Mexican food, and really the same thing for Thai food.
I can easily sit down with a whole calzone and finish it off.
Yeah. See, the thing is, I don't like ricotta, so I tend to go for either
stromboli. I love it. I love strombolis. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're Italian, you call it ricotta. So.
Well, the other thing that I like, I like sausage or pepperoni rolls. And see, it's you basically they roll the dough out into like a big long rectangle, and they stuff cheese and pepperoni or sausage, and then roll it up, and then tuck the one side underneath and bake it.
So let me ask Michael: are you making your calzones as like a piece of toast covering an avocado?
In the apocalypse?
Yeah.
The apocalypse.
I don't know that I'll have all the same ingredients that they're talking about.
Hey, you just give me an idea. It's how a pizza place called Apocalypse Pizza.
It's going to have like a guacamole calzone?
No. Okay. Big guacamole, anything with the avocado will be banned.
What? Joe, I think we just learned that you're old.
You just figured that out now.
Yeah.
I despise avocado, and there's no avocados in Italy, so
there you go. So I've never had a spinach calzone. Now I'm curious. I hated spinach when I was younger, but now it's one of those things. I like spinach. I like kale. I don't know why people give kale such a hard time. Kale's pretty fucking good.
no, it's not
Because
that
eating kale is like being a grazing animal. It's like
No, not if it's cooked well. I used to work in a sandwich shop, sort of an upscale Berkeley sandwich shop, and we had calzones. And I used to make for certain customers who'd pay a little bit of extra. I didn't tell the boss, but I would make them a calzone sandwich. So I would heat the calzone. We had pre-made calzones that came from an Italian. I'm not sure if it was a restaurant or a bakery, but somebody delivered the calzones in the morning, and they were pretty good, authentic. I mean, by my estimation, I don't know. I didn't grow up in New York. Calzones, but I would then heat the calzone, slice it, and then top it with sandwich ingredients, and that was a few people's favorite thing in the deli.
See, the thing is, problem with kale is racist.
It's what?
It's racist.
Why?
Because it's white people collard greens. Black people have eaten collard greens for centuries, and then white people going, "Oh, look at kale!" Like, but look, we've been doing this thing forever. Great. And the thing
I don't care what it's called. I like it.
Well, see the thing though, but see, collard greens is considered low. You never see collard greens in a fancy restaurant, but you'll see kale, and it's the same fucking green, or nearly the same green. It's basically from the same.
So I mean, I don't hate on me for going to the place, but that Olive Garden, which I know isn't real Italian, but it is some pretty good food. But it's not real Italian. But they've got a soup on their menu. It's a potato and sausage soup. It's fan-fucking-tastic, and one of the ingredients is kale.
Yeah.
So I've actually I cooked a big batch of that soup, and it came out really fucking good.
Olive Garden is as Italian as fucking Pizza Hut.
Yeah, I know. And I like Pizza Hut too. We don't have any here. I miss Pizza Hut.
See,
I'm actually thinking about
approximation of the Zuppa Toscana.
What was that?
Sorry?
You found a good approximation of the Zuppa Toscana.
Zuppa Toscana. Yeah, that's what it was. That's
well, and I'm sure what you made was better than what they have at Olive Garden anyway.
It was good.
But the thing is, the only time I'll ever eat Pizza Hut is when I'm not in the corridor between Philadelphia and New York, which obviously includes New Jersey, or Chicago. If I'm anywhere else, okay, Pizza Hut's not great, but I know I'm getting.
Yeah,
Pizza Hut. It's better than Domino's, and we have a Domino's here, and I eat Domino's sometimes. Domino's is awful, but it's pizza. It's kind of that kind of thing. You know what you're getting, and it's still pizza. Right. So I get that, but it's not good pizza. Pizza Hut is better, but there aren't any. The breadsticks at Pizza Hut are fantastic. I love the breadsticks.
See, now that Papa John's is no longer part of Papa John's, because their pizza is actually better than Domino's, but I stopped buying it because of him.
We don't have one of those.
Here, Green Machine.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, though. Way back, I remember in the '90s when I like late '90s, I lived in Allentown, PA, and Olive Garden back then was actually better, but they ran into the problem that all chains do. You hit a point of market saturation where you're not going to grow your customer base, and you're going to gain customers and lose customers, and you're stagnant. So then the only way that because companies insist on profit growth, they start doing the only other way to increase profits, on paper at least, is to cut costs. So they start cutting, they start cutting staff training, they start cutting on the ingredients, and then everything turns to shit.
Well, they did that thing where they were doing like unlimited breadsticks and unlimited pasta, and it was a lie because they turned people away. They told people that's it. That's all you can eat for $1. That's it. And I mean, people took them to court. People took them to court. Some litigious, happy motherfucker said, "No, I'm sorry. Your sign said all I could eat, and I can eat more."
That makes me think of an episode of The Simpsons. there was a case where like Homer like went to an all-you-eat place and they kicked him out, and then he went to like 3 other places and ate more, and they're like, does that sound like a man who had all he could eat?
There was I got like part of it was like Bugs Bunny. There was a Bugs Bunny skit where it was like all you can eat for $1, and then he takes $1. He says, "Okay, that's all you can eat." Or do you want your palm red? You can get your palm red for $1. Paints it red. So we have a Dunkin' Donuts near me that has a great big sign that lights up, big huge sign that says "Open 24 hours," and they close at like 9.
So Vegas is invoking John's thing. I'm not going to do the accent, but the whole thing of like going to the Chinese restaurant, and the guy's like, "You've been here 4 hours. Go home now."
Yeah. So I went out for like a drive through, like memory lane kind of a thing, like 2 weeks ago. I went past the house I grew up in and places that I used to hang out and old friends' houses, where they grew up, that kind of a thing. And it was getting to be late at night, and I was like, I really want a cup of coffee, so I went to Dunkin' Donuts. Great big sign lit up, open 24 hours. They were closed.
Not in a row.
And yeah, apparently, I mean, I was like, I don't understand. It's Dunkin' fucking Donuts. Since when do they close?
Is it just because of COVID or what?
I don't know. That place was always it's been there for longer than I've been alive, and it was always 24 hours. So the fact that it was closed was really fucking weird. But I think it might be COVID.
So there's
because the 24-hour diner by me closes now at night. So
there's this supposed worker shortage going on, where people just don't want to work for low wages, so they're holding out.
Well, the McDonald's in downtown Boulder is paying $18 an hour for all positions.
Oh, so Steuben's in Arvada is paying $20 an hour to their deep fat fry technician. The guy who makes the fries gets $20 an hour. Panda Express, the people who warm up the frozen stuff on the walks, those people make $16.50. The people who are selling the food up front only make $16. Just start with no
most of the Dunkin' Donuts in my area, not all of them, but most of the Dunkin' Donuts in my area, it's usually typically an Indian family that'll own the franchise, and they employ their entire family, so they all work together. So typically, Dunkin' Donuts is a little bit, not completely, but a little bit immune to the whole worker shortage thing, because normally it's
Family
husband, wife, cousins, children, and all that kind of stuff that are working there, and they all live in the same house quite often, or at least for a while, until they're turning profits and stuff. But I mean, so it doesn't really happen with a lot of the Dunkins, but McDonald's and Burger King and all that stuff, they've had that problem. That hit them pretty good.
The worst feeling I've gotten as far as being a skilled person with a degree and license and hearing somebody else's pay for not having any skill or degree or license. The point where I almost felt like, I don't want him getting his. I heard somebody got a job at Delta Airlines being the person who cleans up the plane, puts all the tray tables back, puts the magazines in place, and cleans the overhead bins and vacuums real quick so that the next set of people can get on. $26 an hour. That person. I'm like, if that guy's making 26, how do I want to adjust everybody else's pay?
So, but that guy, I mean, it's not like he doesn't really deserve it. I mean, he's touching everything that all the sick people breathed on.
Yeah, I want to leave him with his 26 and just, adjust everybody else who I feel like maybe they should be making more in Harrison. I'll leave him with his 26. But like, man, it really tested my resolve on that.
Well, we've evolved a culture where people's remuneration does not necessarily reflect their value to the overall culture. Teachers, nurses, firefighters come to mind, but there's lots of occupations that you could list that we all depend on that don't make as much money relative to people, say, for example, in show business or sports, and show business and sports in particular makes so much money that I frankly find it obscene. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, though. You got to remember is that the players of whatever sport it is, they're the ones that are generating the bulk of the revenue. They are, so as much as they're getting paid, their teams are making, way more than that. And plus, there's revenue sharing, so that the teams that don't have a lot of money make money off of the teams that are. So I used to get upset about that. My thing is that the fact that these owners charge so much for the tickets, that's why there's so much revenue. But actually a lot of it though comes from ad revenue and merchandise.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that the people doing the sport are no different than the people flipping burgers. Is that they're the ones who actually make the product. So if they should be getting a substantial portion of the revenue, whatever that is,
it's always nice to hear Joe articulate the labor theory of value.
well, Jack, you and I have disagreed on a number of things, but on that we are in perfect agreement.
So those sports players, some of those leagues have all the owners get together and they hatch this plan called salary caps, where they all agree to not pay past this certain amount for the entirety of their whole team. Actually suppresses the value of the players. It's hard to feel bad for them because they're making in the millions, but really they should be making more.
Yeah.
I can't even remember what the number was. It was something I couldn't even wrap my head around, like 58 grand a week. And that's like the lowest paid person in Major League Baseball.
And baseball's not even an entertaining game.
No, the minimum salary in baseball is $450,000 a year.
Yeah, that's league minimum.
That's league minimum.
So that's pretty good money.
Oh, hell yeah.
I think he could be pretty comfortable on 450.
Oh, sure. Here's the thing, though. See, the people that try to distract us with like, oh, look what actors make or look what sports figures make, they're the ones who defend the CEOs of major corporations getting tens of millions of dollars and having golden parachutes. Think about that. I forget what company it was. The guy got a $23 million golden parachute. He got fired, and his punishment was to walk away with $23 million.
That happens all the time. That happened to what's his name?
That'll teach him.
That happened to what's his name? Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
He gets sacked for sexual harassment. $26 million to go out the door.
Yeah, and see that to me is obscene. So basically, you failed at your job because I'm pretty sure I'm sure we've all lost jobs here and there, and none of us walked away. I bet you none of us walked away with even $1,000, let alone anything close to $1 million.
Yeah, I've never seen a severance package from any job I've ever had.
Yeah, I had one from one job, but even then, I didn't walk away with millions, and it was mostly because it was very spurious grounds, and they were worried about a discrimination lawsuit. So they said, "Here's money, go away."
So, okay, are we going to talk about Arizona?
Sure, I've been waiting to bring that up, but I've never been able to find a convenient place to stick it in. So, thank you for finding a convenient place to stick it in.
I'm good at That's what I bring to the survival group.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Convenient place to stick it in.
So yeah. So seriously though, I read a tweet which pretty much encapsulates my whole feelings on the matter. It's like, We now confirm that Joe Biden has won the election. That'll be $5.7 million, please.
Right.
I mean, because that's pretty much what happened. They just prolonged it. It was supposed to take 3 weeks. It took 6 months or almost 6 months.
So this poisonous thing that they did, with this ridiculous, phony bullshit cyber ninja audit, has turned out that, like you had just said, that, right? Joe Biden actually really did win. Actually,
By
his
more than
win
they
was-
thought.
Right, his win was actually slightly bigger than was thought, but they didn't stop there. It's all conspiracy theories. It's all even worse. So now that they've come to the end of their journey on this, they're using it as an opportunity to poison our system a little bit more.
Well,
Helping
as I
to
mentioned,
bring about
QAnon's not
the end.
going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're just doing more to bring about the end that we were talking about before, about undermining our election systems, and then what happens then. So, yeah. There was a guy on TV last night who was talking about it. He was just like, anywhere between 4 and 7 years, he sees the breakdown of American government.
Wow.
Yeah, the thing about it is I don't see it ending well for the right wing either. That's the weird part.
It's not going to end well for anybody.
Yeah.
Well, if things are really going to break down because people can't get along anymore, it won't actually matter who's in power when it happens, in terms of they're not going to be able to stop it if it happens during someone's reign on the right or the left. I mean, I don't agree with certain aspects of Marxist theory, but one thing I do kind of agree on, and I'm horrifyingly oversimplifying here, but if you shit on the lower class long enough, sooner or later they're going to revolt. It's as simple as that, and it doesn't matter if the right or the left is shitting on people. If the people at the bottom decide it's time, they're going to revolt, and they're not going to really care too much about the blue or the red. They're going to try to get rid of whoever's that they see as being their oppressor at the time when they finally snap. And what the snapping point will be for our society is terrifying to contemplate, considering COVID hasn't done it. Right? So how much worse would it have to be before people literally start? You just have to literally have to pick sides,
Yeah. Well, Rick Hanauer says the pitchforks are coming.
Yeah, we're already there. I mean, that's kind of the point, though. It's like we're basically kind of already there. Once people don't believe in the system anymore, as far as whether or not an election was legitimate, that's it. You're kind of done. And people don't believe that the last election was legitimate, even when they themselves research it and come back with the answer that yes, it was legit. They still don't believe it. I mean, they don't believe their own eyes. They don't believe their own work, their own research. That's bad. That's bad.
I didn't get to be here in any of the shows directly after January 6th, but I know that there was a lot of disagreement about whether or not January 6th was a coup. And I'm not sure if folks have read that article from the Pakistani national who was writing about their sort of attempted coup that happened something like 16 or 18 years ago or something like that. And he talks about you don't recognize that a coup has occurred, especially if it's a silly coup, especially if it's something that has kind of failed or looks ridiculous at the time. It's still a near killing blow that may not kill immediately.
I think I read that.
But it has long-term effects, and I think that it does. And I know that I probably come across as a pessimist here, but I do think that the American system's days are pretty numbered, and that timeline of about 7 years sounds pretty right to me.
There's a friend of the chat. There's a friend of the show in the chat. who scoffs at the idea that January 6th was an insurrection. He scoffs at the idea that it was anything really all that serious. And I'd love to agree with them. I really would. Except for the fact of what Jack had just said, even if it's silly, even if it seems like it's nothing and it was quickly put down, it's still bad. And it's still bad that it happened.
Fundamentally changes what we think about our government forever.
Yeah, forever. And I mean, as silly as it was, yeah, it's kind of like, in a way, it's like September 11th, except it's in a different way. Like, it changed. Everything from that point on is different.
Considering everything that we know about all the shenanigans that Trump was up to prior to January 6th, in terms of his attempts to hold on to power by whatever illegitimate means he could concoct, when January 6th actually happened, and we see how close. I mean, when Ashley Babbitt got shot, there were still members of Congress in the gallery waiting to get out of the chamber. That's how fucking close they came. They were less than 2 minutes away from Mike Pence. That's how close they came.
Now, I mean, it's possible
at all. That whole situation could have lasted for weeks or longer, and delayed the inauguration, and who knows what else. I mean, we came so fucking close to losing it on January 6th. So when people try to make light of it, it actually, as you can tell, it kind of makes my blood boil.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, there are so many people. If you're like, oh, well, there are only a small number of people who are really like of the revolutionary mindset, right? There's only a few of them who really, really wanted to do damage, and it's just like, well, it doesn't really take much. Number one. Number two, if somebody had grabbed a hold of some of the congressional members, whether it's Senate or the House, all depends on who grabs them. You know, what would have come next? Absolutely, for some of those folks, if they had gotten a hold of them, they would have been assassinated immediately. Others, it might not have been a big deal. It might have been a shouting match. Others would have demanded that they put them on some kind of a citizen trial,
Right.
Where, of course, they would end up getting shot at the end of it, which is what they wanted to do to the governor of Michigan.
It's terrifying to contemplate what had happened.
I mean, and to laugh at, or to say, I don't want to say laugh because he wasn't laughing at it. He was just saying that it wasn't really an insurrection. And when you think about that, there was a plot to kidnap multiple governors and put them on a sham trial and execute them around the time that the insurrection happened. Yeah, that's an insurrection. I'm sorry.
I do have to say one thing about the attempted kidnapping of Governor Whitmer. There is a pretty substantial amount of evidence that perhaps the FBI had something to do with that. And I think that one's going to continue to be complicated. It's very similar to, certain events of theoretical Islamic terrorism, where once you get into it deeply, you find that the FBI actually, gave the equipment, a fake bomb, and did the encouraging to try and get somebody to bomb something that they wouldn't have bombed normally. I think it's a very complicated situation, but it does appear that in the Whitmer kidnapping, there were at least two different people who were potentially FBI agents who were helping encourage it. So I'm not in any way defending the people who might have planned to do that, but I am saying that we have a long history of sort of this agency blowback, where government agencies will interact with small groups of people and potentially push forward. I mean, obviously it happened with the Black Panthers. I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing, but right. I'm still kind of like going down the rabbit hole to figure out what the truth is here, but it's definitely not as clean cut as, a rogue group of militia types decided to kidnap the governor. That's unfortunately, I wish it was that simple.
Vegas, I disagree.
Just real quick to that point, I might have said this right after the insurrection itself. I can't remember, but I mean, like, I knew that they were planning on some kind of major shenanigans before we talked about it here on the Breakfast Club before January 6th happened. So that it was relatively public knowledge that something was going to happen. You know, no one really knew the shape of it. But it would be, if I was like, I don't know, China or Russia or Iran or even Israel for that matter, I would have had some of my operatives in that freaking crowd. You know what I mean? I mean, any adversary of the United States or even allies would have been remiss not to take advantage of that opportunity, right?
Well,
So we don't even know really all the different ways that this might play out when it comes to the investigation.
well, here's the other thing too, though. I mean, okay, to Vegas's point that the vast majority of them had no idea what they were doing. The thing is, that doesn't defeat the idea that it's an insurrection, though, because the people who did plan it and were there and did know what they were doing were counting on those idiots to be cover.
If I may, just to get home with Vegas, that's also a description of all the soldiers who went over to Afghanistan. They had no idea of the larger picture.
We also have to acknowledge that, recent documents from the Trump administration shows that there was inside knowledge within the Trump administration about, what was happening on January 6th. And backup plans and a plan B and a plan C. So it's difficult to say this is all sort of random, emergent phenomena of crowd dynamics when there were actual notes about what do we do if this happens, and there's gaming out of how they will lawyer their way through if Pence does what Trump wanted him to do, or all this other stuff. So
I want to really quick. I want to address Vegas, and then Propter Hawk, and then Demon.
Actually, I would like to address Demon.
Okay, so Vegas. That I'm going to echo Mike. That echoes a lot of military campaigns all over the place. There are people that are in the planning of it and in charge of making sure that it's executed. And then they give the orders to people who don't have a fucking clue what they're supposed to be doing or what the end goal is. They just know that they're following orders and they follow orders. So there you go. And there were there's plenty of video evidence about what was happening at the time at the Capitol, and there were people, many people who had detailed plans of the building and what windows they needed to go in, and they were talking to other people about how to do certain things to be able to get to the building in order to do what they needed to do. So there was a lot of coordination there, and to say that there wasn't is just being absolutely blind to the facts on the ground. Propter Hawk, how many have been charged with insurrection? Doesn't really matter, because they're not going to charge some schmo from Kentucky with insurrection when all he was doing was following the crowd, kind of like what we were just saying. They're going to save those kinds of charges for people higher up. And this is an investigation that is nowhere near over. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are people within the government that get charged with some pretty heavy duty shit. At least one.
Yeah. And then
it's a crime if they don't.
Yeah, now I would like to address Demon.
I saw videos of pallets of bricks. Absolutely, they were there. I don't know who put them there, and I'm not saying that the government did anything, but I did see them. I saw footage from all over the place, from all different cities. When all of a sudden there's a pallet of bricks on the streets, you're right. You're right. But you want to know something? Just because a weapon is there doesn't mean you have to pick it up.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you know who put it there either.
A lot of people were pretty suspicious of the piles of bricks that showed up in multiple cities during the summer. And the vast majority of people, I think, recognized, even if they weren't actually a plant.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, right, and that's the thing, though. I thought it was kind of funny because Demon is trying to say like we're denying it. I mean, no, we acknowledge the bricks were there. In fact, I would tend to think again, we don't have direct evidence, but I would not be surprised to learn that the police put them there in order to entice people.
See, Seattle, the cops in Seattle, they announced they were going to abandon the police station. They announced it, Capitol Hill. They announced that they were abandoning the police station for no real reason. And they were like, oh, and this whole place is going to be all taken over, so we have to abandon it. And it was 3 days before anything really happened. 3 days. It took 3 days for that place to be overwhelmed. They left it there on purpose. They knew. They set up the conditions for their own precinct to be overrun.
Yeah, there's also a video, and I kind of went down this whole brick rabbit hole at the time that it was happening. It's really difficult to know that any of these things weren't just, cities planning to, repave parts of the sidewalk and stuff. But as a former construction worker, I'll tell you that materials are valuable. You don't generally leave them stacked on the sidewalk. They're usually behind a locked area. But there is also one video that is relatively suspicious. Somebody took from a building vantage point down at a parking lot that was behind one of the main streets. And there you see a flatbed truck that is unloading pallets of bricks. And there is a police cruiser nearby and, a police officer on hand. That doesn't mean anything, but it is sort of this, like, it certainly inflamed the conspiracy.
There's definitely enough evidence to be suspicious of it.
Well,
definitely.
Not to mention that there were a number of people that, again, haven't been verified, but at least were identified. There's guys with the gas masks who there's tons of, who some people identified as police officers, active duty police officers that were breaking windows and doing all sorts of shit.
Yep. And there was a guy who's a right-wing instigator who started throwing bricks and stuff during one protest, and like people in the crowd tackled him. And the internet identified him. They were like, "Oh, that's this guy from this show. He has he's a right-winger. He has a show online." So yeah, lots of really shady shit happened at those.
Plus there were some left-wingers doing it, and and what I saw, there were some anarchists. So again, they weren't part of BLM. They're co-opting BLM to go out there and break shit.
And I wanted to echo what Green Machine said. I thought Demon was going to someplace that was more interesting, that we were boring. I mean, he said we were boring. We weren't interesting enough. He was going somewhere else. So
Well, I thought he was going to say something that we was disagreeing with what we actually think, which we're like, no, we're with you, dude.
Yeah.
My sleep is all still screwed up because I've only been on Central Time for the last 2 days, so I'm still, my sleep is still on Eastern Time. But I've been getting, it's been weird.
I'll be on Central Time the next 2 weekends in a row because I'll be broadcasting from St. Louis.
Oh, good. You get to try the pizza.
I will be avoiding the pizza. I've already had my experience of St. Louis pizza, and I'm not impressed. They do make some pretty good other stuff in St. Louis, though. But yeah.
So I never watched the show. I figure why watch it? I was here for it. But after, I think it was last week's show, I ended up watching a small portion of it with Peach because she wanted to show me something.
What show?
This show.
This show.
So I never watch it because I'm on it. Why would I watch it? Right. So I never watch it. So I ended up watching a little bit of it.
Is that because you guys were having the conversation on mute while we were talking? Was that you watched?
No. You know what? It was the week before. Anyway, whatever.
Sorry.
Here's what happened. So I ended up watching a little bit of it with her, and I decided I am never going to watch it again. Watching this show kind of triggers some dysphoria. I look great. I do. I'm sorry. I look great. I sound awful.
Aww.
So anybody who has to look at this, beautiful, beautiful woman and hear this voice, I'm sorry. I'm working on it. So,
Well, do you have a speech therapist at the moment?
no. Nope. So
Is that on the agenda?
it's on the agenda.
Yeah,
It's
agenda.
definitely on the agenda.
Well, see, the thing is, though, but you sound like you to me. So whoever so
Yeah, I get that. I watched it and I was just like, oh my God. Oh, that's awful. That's so bad. So I'll never watch again.
oh, you know who ended up coming out to the conference out here? You know Foxy Jezebel. Yes, I did not expect her to be here. She so surprised me yesterday.
Wow. She actually, I'm friends with her on Facebook again. We stopped talking a while back. There was some disagreement. And it was just like, yeah, fuck you.
Yeah.
In both
You had a
directions.
disagreement with someone on Facebook?
Yeah,
I
that
know,
seems
I know.
strange.
It's so rare.
Especially for me. But
I'm going to. I think I'm going to try to be social again.
Oh,
So,
good.
I don't know how successful I'll be, but I'm going to try.
Well, listen, friends, I think it's a good moment to wrap up. We seem to be winding down a little bit here anyway. So let's say goodbye to the audience and we'll keep talking afterwards for a little minute here. So I want to thank Proctor Hawk, the Green Machine, Laplace Demon, CRB Vegas, and everybody else who has been commenting for taking part in the broadcast. And we look forward to seeing you guys next weekend on the Breakfast Club. Wave goodbye like the Brady Bunch, everybody.